Huh? So during the Middle Ages, they were seeking, Leonardo da Vinci was seeking it, the alchemy stone that turned lead into gold was a big, people were searching for it and trying to find the secret. And so I'm making it sound like if you would have tuned in 30 seconds earlier, you would have found the secret.
This was 3 weeks ago. So
No.
I talk about it.
Good morning.
Secret that people have been looking for.
Welcome to the School Board's workshop on July 14th. First on our agenda will be Mrs. Corcoran and the budget.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Krista Kurtner's here, and she's going to kind of walk you through the operating budget as it sits currently. The information you received was prior to the finalization of the actual budget. And as you know, we had some line item vetoes that occurred. We lost, from the conference report, we lost the $800,000 for the summer learning academies, and in the FEFP, they removed all school recognition funds since there were no school grades for the 1920 school year. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Krista and let her walk you through where we're at currently and where we see next year.
Good morning. What we'll do is, if you have the table, the Word document, the general fund projected results of operations through June 30th and conference report, one will go through that because that's easier to read. So the first page highlights the differences between the last time we talked and then this time. And the changes are basically the fourth calculation has come in, and the FEFP best and brightest funds are being returned, the unused ones. So you can see the state funds are decreasing just slightly because of those two reasons. The local funds are trending just a tiny bit higher. So overall, there's really very little changes in the way we project the revenues this year. And then for the appropriations on page 2, you can see that the salaries from the last time are just kind of trending a little higher based upon our summer programs. And the employee benefits, though, however, are coming in lower because of mostly because of medical. So that's a savings. Purchase services are coming in slightly lower due to the rekeying project already being encumbered, and there was thankfully funds left over from that. And for purchase services for charter schools, that is reduced also because of the fourth calculation of the FEFP. Gasoline is the main reason for energy services trending down at this point in time when this was created. And materials and supplies also are decreasing due to consumables and things not being needed in the schools. Capital outlays a little bit more, and other expenses that usually has to do with our add-on FTE, the AP, IB, ACE, when they're buying tests. That's where those go, and those are expensive. So you can see overall, the appropriations, the expenditures are anticipated to be less. I can tell you, this was 3 weeks ago, so there's been changes even to that now. So just to let you guys know, as of this point in time on page 3, we were supposed to end with a fund balance, an ending financial condition ratio of 12.84%. What you're going to see in the tentative, in like a week from now, is it's been updated even more. And so what you'll see there is that the appropriations are going to be coming in even less, as the salaries and things aren't as much as we thought, and also consumables are down even more. Energy services, because the schools are closed, is down as well. Those are the main reasons. So a lot of those things, of course, are going to be pushed into the new year. But even so, we're going to end better this year because of that. So if we go on to the next page, talking about the tentative or the preliminary budget, that's what this one was for. You can see that nothing has really changed from the last time we met. You knew about the Medicaid claimable coming in a little bit less. The state funds here are being reduced because of the Florida Family Empowerment Scholarship. Basically, they had increased the number of scholarships they were going to allow. What you're going to see in the tentative budget is that state funds is going to be decreased even more because of the Florida School Recognition now not being a part of it, which was $3 million. Around $3 million, and then also because of Summer Learning Academy, the $800,000 that we had in there is also being cut. So you'll see that that's the reason those are going to be lower for state funds. Local funds, you're going to see there it's increasing, and it actually is coming in a tiny bit better because since this 3 weeks ago we've gotten our certified tax roll, and that came in a little bit more. So that'll be increasing. We've already talked a lot about the teacher salary increase allocation and how that's built in on the next page for the salaries and benefits, so that the salaries and the benefits are increasing because mainly due to the teacher salary allocation increase and because of our aides. As you all know, most of our aides became SSP 7s, which is a paraprofessional salary, and they also those became 196-day aides instead of the 186. So those are the changes there.
Hey, Krista, I think so.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me a minute, Krista. Shirley?
Yes, I have a few questions. I'll give them out, and then you can come back. On page 1, if you could break down what the fourth calculation is and the FEFP, or the best and the brightest, how much of that $557,000 was for the fourth calculation versus the best and the brightest? And on page 2, there was like $1.4 million that was reduced because you moved those to July, and then I suppose you moved them till next year's budget. I mean, why was that done? And on page 5, there's an increase of $8.3 million for employee benefits, and I know a lot of that is the FRS. If you could break out how much of that was the FRS. And then, of course, the materials and supplies looks like we're $2.4 million, but of course, we took that, this kind of doubled because we took some of that out of this year and moved it to next year.
Eric?
I'll go by one if you want, but when they call me, I have to do all of them at once.
Do you want me to continue or go back and address those?
So, well, let's go ahead and address them. Do you have the best and brightest return? Because I don't have
Yeah,
that. It was like 300 and some thousand.
I can tell you.
And that was partly because there were people included in our allocation who had already retired that were sent to Tallahassee.
All right, so more than half of that is the best and the brightest?
Yeah.
Oh, you can get back to me on those numbers later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
That's
and a
what
lot of
I
it
didn't
was
think
money
you
being-
wanted.
I can tell you what it was.
Right now.
It was $272,169 got returned.
Thank you.
And the rest was the fourth calc. As far as the materials and supplies, again, because we weren't in our schools were not purchasing supplies. And that has been rolled into the new year. And in addition, the new year is going up substantially because we think we're going to be spending substantially more money on supplies like masks and the rails and things that hopefully will get reimbursed by FEMA, but we don't know yet. So there will be a lot more expenditures next year in that area.
And also, we trended lower than prior years, so a lot of it too is because that's a normal trending, and then we'd have this on top of it.
I think the last one was the FRS because the increased benefits, but a lot of that had to do with what the legislature did to us, requiring us to pay additional FRS.
Yes, we had an 18% increase in our FRS rates, so that's a big portion of it. And then there is an anticipated increase in the cost of overall Social Security and Medicare because of the teacher salary increases. So the benefit component of that additional funding is included in there. And then there is an anticipated increase of 2% for the 2021 calendar year for medical benefits.
Thank you.
Eric?
Yes, I don't have page numbers, but I'm going to be referring to the preliminary budget where it talks about revenue.
Okay.
And then there's paragraphs that talk about the salaries.
Okay.
And then the second paragraph's about CARES Act. Are you with me?
Yep.
Okay, and in the CARES Act, it appears, because it's on this page, and it says that the CARES Act money will be deposited into the general fund. But then in the last sentence, it says, the CARES Act funding will be used to fund 64 instructional units previously appropriated to the general fund. But if the CARES Act is going into the general fund, wouldn't that mean that they would still be appropriated to the general
It
fund?
should be general revenue instead of general fund.
Okay.
So it's normally would be paid for with FEFP dollars, and
So the 64, who are these?
Referendum.
Yeah, I would have thought the 64, the CARES Act money would just kind of go to the general fund to offset any deficits we would have spent, but it looks like it's specifically allocated to 64 instructional personnel. And so I'm curious, who are these 64 instructional personnel?
So here's.
And what was the methodology to do?
So when we originally heard about the CARES Act funding, we were told that there was no supplanting provision. So you could supplant 100%. It didn't have to be supplemental services. That you could supplant your general fund and help offset any deficits you had.
And I'm fine with that, yeah.
Which is great.
Right.
Unfortunately, every school district in the state, I think, filed their plan using that, and then we had another webinar and we were told we couldn't.
Okay.
So it kind of changed the rules on us midstream. We were a little shocked, and so we had to go back and find, which our CARES Act has still not been approved, but we have now resubmitted, I believe. I'll have to double check with Laura or Tara. But the plan is now to go back and recoup the costs of supplemental school instruction for things like art, music, things that normally our millage would cover during the last quarter of the school year, because we had to move to remote learning. So technically, when we moved to remote learning, those types of additional courses, non-core courses, we could have chosen to maybe not teach. And so that is my hope, is that that's where the funding for the CARES Act will apply. And
Now,
so those are the positions.
Also, it'd be in the positions that we did not have to teach during remote learning, but we chose to teach, and that's what the CARES Act. Okay, I just want to
Yeah,
understand.
that's the plan.
So
That's what we've submitted.
will there be separate money from FEMA? Because I know we have talked about the cost of distributing out the food and some other
Yeah.
direct cost that the arts program is kind of a little bit of indirect cost, because you would have that cost. You would still be teaching art if you were on campus, but there are other costs, for example, distributing food that we wouldn't have had. So are those going to be covered under FEMA or CARES Act?
They're not covered under FEMA. They're covered under the food and nutrition.
But are there
cluster.
other costs like that aren't?
So FEMA, so separate from food service has been approved for non-congregate feeding for the 2021 school year. So we are able to feed our students even if they're not in school. So that is a good thing. But I will tell you, the Food and Nutrition Services Fund is struggling and will continue to struggle if we don't have kids eating meals. However, the FEMA funding, what we've allocated for FEMA is all of our PPE funds. Jody can talk about it too, but what we've allocated so far is masks, cleaning supplies, those desk shields, all of those types of items that we've been purchasing have been allocated and placed into the FEMA account where we're tracking all of those costs. Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, and the majority of those things have been placed into the warehouse, so we can continually provide them over the year to schools. But anything that related to PPE or prepping for a return to school in a COVID environment, those are all anything that we could charge to FEMA, we tried to charge to that.
Do you have any idea what I assume you're charging everything that was extra as a result of the pandemic, and do you have any idea?
Well, not everything that's extra is allowable, but PPE is. So
but do you know roughly how much is going to go, we're asking from FEMA, and how much isn't allowable? Just trying to understand what the budget impact of the pandemic is so far.
There's been probably over $1 million allocated into the FEMA fund, or close to already, but we're not done.
And do you have a guess of what the stuff that's not allocable?
Well, salaries related to those. So the federal CARES Act leaves. So we've had people who have taken leave under the 6 eligible criteria for leave. And as a governmental entity, there is no tax
Tax
relief
credit.
for us, so that is all out of pocket on the part of the district. So that will continue as we move forward.
But you would have to pay their salary if they were here, I mean.
But
I was asking
not
for
if they
additional,
weren't-
right, I'm
if
glad
they
we can get
weren't
reimbursed
working
for
and
it.
they didn't have
I was
leave.
looking for any additional costs.
Well, but that could potentially be an additional
Okay.
cost if they didn't have leave.
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes, in a recent call with Jared Moskowitz, he mentioned that emergency management would provide us with PPE for the start of school. Is that part of these funds that you mentioned from FEMA, or is this additional? And have we
received
sought to get?
pallets of cloth masks that the schools will be able to get allocated for all of their employees. So we do, that's what we've received from them in
Okay.
terms of PPE is the cloth face coverings. So we
Okay.
have cloth face masks in the warehouse that will be available for, I think the plan is to distribute five face masks. I think they come in packages of 5. So there'll
Did
be
you know
5.
you can wash these masks, these paper masks, and
Oh, really?
reuse them? A doctor just told me that recently. I thought, oh, okay.
Shirley?
My strings came off the second time I washed them. The FEMA dollars, if I'm not mistaken, when I was reading this, the FEMA is only reimbursing us 75% the cost of these things, and then I think 12.5% is coming from the state, and
And
then
12.5%.
the other 12.5 is from our regular budget. Is that accurate?
That's the way all FEMA reimbursements are, yes.
Yeah, so FEMA is not giving it to us, but
Yes.
paying a big portion. Okay, thank you.
Please continue. Thank you.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, I think we were on the conference report for the tentative or preliminary budget. So if we were talking about the revenues again, just to say that basically what is being forecasted there is for the state funds will be reduced because, again, of the Florida Family Empowerment Scholarship and the Florida School Recognition, which is the bonuses that teachers get, and also schools get extra funds, and the Summer Learning Academy. And the local funds, like I said, that has increased as of this point in time. It did, and then again it has because we finally got our certified tax roll, which is going up a little bit. The transfer is decreasing mainly because of our initiative in 1920 for the Rekeep project. So that's what you see there. In the appropriations and the salaries and the benefits, again, you see the salaries are going up mainly because of the teacher salary increase allocation and our aides. And of course, the benefits are going up because of the FRS increase. And like Mitzi already talked about with the medical going up like 2% overall. The purchase services for the district is going down. Again, that's due to the Rekeep project that was sitting there. And the charter schools are going up because of the increase in the FEFP and increase in anticipated enrollment. Energy services is going up for next year because it obviously trended much lower this year. And also we're watching things such as the utilities for the water and stuff. The materials and supplies is going up for next year compared to this year because, again, it trended down. And also, as we talked about, maybe additional costs, or there will be additional costs for consumables. Capital outlay is, pretty much status quo, it's just a little bit down. And then other expenses is due to, mostly, like I said, due to the expenses for the testing of the AP, IB, and ACE. That's a lot of what goes into those. But they do they receive a lot of revenue because of it. So that's pretty much how it's looking. And then again, when the tentative budget comes out, what you're going to see is it's going to be a little bit less in the salaries because they're not going to be getting their bonuses because of the Florida School Recognition. So therefore, there's always a little decrease in benefits of what they would have gotten for bonuses. But other than that, energy services, materials, and supplies may be a little bit more too because of the way we're anticipating that to trend. But it won't be much of a difference. The main difference you're going to see is because of the Florida School Recognition. It was $3 million. So, and then on the final page, which just talks about the financial condition ratio. This one talks about us ending at 12.84 and then next year being 9.2. What you're going to see on the tentative is going to end about, 13.6, and then for this year, for 1920, and then 9.81 for 2021. So that will be what you're going to see. We're working on the new budget book. Hopefully you all will like it and find it easy to read. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Don't see any. Looks like you've taken care of it along the way. Thank you, Krista.
Yeah, the team's been working hard. Thank you very much.
Good job,
Thank you.
Assistant CFO.
Okay, so the next item is we're bringing back the Booker High School VPA project. There have been some questions and some additional directions, so Jody and his team have been working on that, so I'm going to turn it over to Jody, and we have Sheena here who does the capital budget if there are any budget questions.
So Sheena, do you want to pop up here and maybe we could talk a second about the capital budget, because you have adjusted the revenue down a little bit since the last time they saw it. We made a couple adjustments, so let's start with that and then we'll roll right into the Booker High project. And Jamal, I think we have Ernie online to zoom in to talk specifically about the Booker High project. So if we could just make sure he's available to zoom in, that would be awesome.
Hello, can you hear me?
We finally got some.
I think I may be showing up as Dr. Shelley because I actually,
We finally got some information.
Hold on, Ernie. 1 minute. I'll get to you. Hold on, okay?
no problem.
Go ahead, Sheena.
We finally got some data and information from the county regarding property values and such. So we were able to finally do a millage adjustment based on actual data. I actually had adjusted it down a lot more, so we came in about 600,000 to the good when we got the final numbers from the county. So we're anticipating a projected revenue of $99,842,435. And that's at 96% collections.
Could you tell me that number one more time, please?
I certainly can.
99,000. Million.
$99,842,435.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I didn't really have to change anything for the appropriations since it came in better than what I was originally anticipating. So we didn't have to do any moving projects around or deleting projects for this year.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, yeah, we've done so much. I'm not sure what spreadsheet I'm supposed to be using at this point.
That's like me. I don't know which document is the last one.
Yeah, I have to date them now. When I save them, I just put a date at the end, the date I save it, so I know which one's the most recent. That's really all that changed because we had already changed the sales tax proceeds before. But we did get a little bit more information because, of course, we're in contact with the county regarding the upcoming sales surtax. So they've given us some projections based on their trending, and we're using their projections at this point until we see farther. However, I will say that the sales tax collections have not been hurt as bad as we had anticipated.
It's crazy.
In fact, I don't know if it's because people were rushing out to buy supplies, maybe. I don't know the reason behind it, but we actually are going to collect as much or maybe even a little more than we had budgeted for 1920. And so the projection that I
projected down, we're definitely going to over collect.
That's all the toilet paper that everyone bought and stocked.
Yeah.
And it could have been. Again, everything is so delayed. So the April sales, where you collected, the vendors collect the taxes, are paid to the state in May and released to us in June. So, but I will tell you, in June, our sales tax collections were surprisingly good compared to what, I mean, I literally thought we were going to get hardly anything.
Yeah.
And they came in quite well, and that was based on April sales, the month we were fully shut down. So now that more businesses have opened up, I'm hoping that it won't be as devastating as we had anticipated. But yeah, it was a very pleasant surprise when we received our sales tax collection.
Eric?
Yeah, it could be because people are rushing out to get supplies, but that has kind of dwindled down. Anybody in the state of Florida knows that it's impossible for our sales tax not to be declining. I mean, just go to restaurants, go to, go out. People are not out there buying. So so you're not making any adjustments for sales tax?
No, we've already made
And what was the adjustment?
20%.
For 1920, I adjusted sales tax down by 1.4 million.
And what percentage is that?
I can't remember what percent. I don't think I went off a percentage. I took the collections up to that point and then said, okay, we're probably going to collect only $1 million a month, when we usually collect somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million per month.
Okay. So, and so what about for 2021?
For 2021, we actually used the county's projection, which was 19,202,000.
So a little bit more than 1.5 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So the number that you had used pre-pandemic, you're projecting that essentially during the pandemic it would be roughly the same.
Well, we're projecting less by about 1.4 million in total.
Out of 18 million, so about 5% decrease? 5, 6,
Something like that, 4 point some percent.
Yeah, just doing it in my head. 5. We'll call it 5 amongst friends.
That's great.
That concerns me because unlike our previous presentation, we kind of look at the general revenue fund in isolation year to year, although we do look at the end. I look at the ending fund balance, and it is a topic of discussion, which clearly rolls over from year to year. But when we get capital, we're giving it at a 5-year presentation, so you can clearly see how things roll over from year to year. And personally, I think that we should be more conservative in approach. And I mean, I have every reasonable expectation to think that the sales tax collections are going to go down significantly. But if you get the experts saying something else, but I don't have any data. I just have empirical evidence of going out in my life experiences that lead me to believe that that's going to go down. And if we don't do this conservatively, it's going to impact projects that we have on a 5-year project going forward. So I think a reduction of 4 to 5% is not enough. That's just one board member's life experience.
So let me also comment on that. If I think in terms of, I agree with you in terms of a conservative look on the budget outlook. Let me remind everybody, we hold back 7% on the capital budget, just like we do on the operating side, and it's not anything that's set in stone. It's just something we've elected to do several years ago. So you see that reserve fund balance, and it is there for those types of things that, as they come up, like we may be talking about cameras and things like that. That's where we would use that money.
Do you expect us to have? Well, obviously, we're going to have additional general revenue costs because of the pandemic. Do you expect capital costs
Yes.
that you're having to build?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And are those additional capital costs built into this?
Not at this point. That's
Not
what
at this point.
Yes.
So we're going to have more expenses and less revenue.
Yes.
Okay.
Potentially, yeah.
So with that,
Wait, hold on. Bridget?
Well, and I don't want to be duplicative, but very much of some of the comments or questions I had were similar to Mr. Robinson's. I guess just to confirm, because I would agree, so we're utilizing the data from the county from the predictive standpoint, and that's a reduction of 5%. Okay. And again, I don't want to be redundant to what Mr. Robinson, but I will share my same concerns that just as and if we're utilizing the data that you got from April, as you just said, I'm curious to see how that trends as it starts to come through, because economically people, a lot job loss, et cetera. So again, I know we utilize a lot of predictive economic functions to figure that out, but hinging again off of the unknowns, that was set in stone of what we were looking at pre-pandemic. And I know today a number of conversations will certainly include likely expenditures. And in addition, my biggest concern is the unknown, and I think we've said this before, going conservatively, because to allow ourselves to be more nimble to respond to this completely unprecedented moment. So I share the concerns that Mr. Robinson said, and it's not a reflection of your information. I just think as we go forward, being judicious and thoughtful in that. So thank you.
And I agree 100%. I think I'm really anxious to hear Amy Baker and the revenue estimating conferences on these things, because again, there isn't enough data yet. Since we are just now getting April, we don't have enough to even trend or get a close call of what it really will be. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of waiting for us to have more data to then know whether or not we're even in the ballpark at 5%.
Correct, and just spending habits even in general, especially as we're in a spike right now. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jane?
Well, we're not over this yet by a long shot, and I agree with Mr. Robinson and Mrs. Ziegler. I think that we don't really have the long-term ramifications of this, because we're not anywhere near finished with COVID, or it with us, I should say. And I really think that we have to walk cautiously. And the HEROES Act that's hung up in the Senate would be nice if that passed. Because that does offer state and local governments as well as schools additional money and funds that we could use, we desperately could use for some things. And I'm thinking about mechanical engineers, and have they looked at our air conditioners, and do we have HEPA filters, and what supply and return do we have between fresh air and recirculating air? These things are more important than ever now that we have understood that this disease is airborne. So I don't know that we've had the money to do those kinds of things, but they certainly are things that would be important in opening schools. So I caution our spending, and I think we have to be very, very careful this entire year, because we are not done with this yet.
Agreed. And just so you know, in sales tax, we have the 7.5% reserve, plus we have monies over and above that we're not using, that are not in the budget, in case of loss of more revenue or emergency things that may come up that we have to handle. So we didn't budget like everything, even with the revenue that we budgeted with. So we still have a little bit of cushion.
Thank you. Bridget?
Thank you. I'm a follow-up, just as, and going back to what I believe you had said from Google, and I want to make sure I clarify. So when it looks at projects, and there were no changes for the 2021 year?
Not since the last time you saw it.
Okay, and Jody, can you?
Well, let me just clarify, because I think there was. So we actually did move a project around, and I'm not sure that you're aware of it. So the one move that we moved some money around within projects. So in Northport High, over 3 years, we moved money from one year to another. At the end of the day, that helped us out, and we can still get the project done. Not a big deal. The project budget's still the same as you saw originally. The one move that you will see on here that I don't think you saw last time is, if you take a look at the line item STC Northport Phase 3, that's a project that's been budgeted for several years now for $7.5 million. We really don't have a scope with that. It was sitting in year 3. You see, we've pushed that to year 5 to accommodate some of those moves in revenue. Again, that's something that since I've been in this position, we've never really sat down and talked about scope. I haven't really had a chance to talk with Ron and Mr. DiPillo in terms of what he thought Phase 3 looked like down in Northport, but we have pushed that out 2 years. Just because we did not have a good idea of what that scope was. So that is a change since the last time you saw it, I believe.
And has that been back? I mean, so is that on I'm going to use the term from a freezing standpoint. Is that on hold?
So
Because it was prior approved or no?
So no, so it's always been in year 3 for the last 4 or 5
So it
budgets that you've
continues to
seen,
float.
and it's never moved forward just because there's never been a scope developed, and we've never moved. I think previous superintendent, I remember him saying Northport's going to have to earn that next phase. I don't know we ever got into having a conversation about what that next phase looks like. So it always was in year 3, never moved. The last budget you saw, it was sitting in year 3 again. Because we were getting a little tight in those outer years, we moved it to year 5 again. We would need to start having conversations about what that project looks like, what the scope might be, but I have not been involved in any of those conversations recently.
So it's a placeholder, but no supportive discussion of whether enrollment or whatever, because I recall that being the big thing if we did go forward.
Correct. And if
That's exactly what it is if that school could support
Sustain it.
additional programs, then we would have the conversation about expanding the service.
and that 7.5 million, if I remember correctly, is just it's a number that was put in there just to put a placeholder. It was not driven by scope of any kind.
But weren't we also intending to build in Northport a high school? And that would take the overflow from the discussion I remember is the additional students from Northport and Venice would go to whatever high school we were building or.
Different project.
Right.
That's the West Villages project,
That's
which is
I know
not
that.
currently budgeted in here yet.
So what are we budgeting for Northport?
STC.
Additional student stations?
No, so STC Northport, okay? And so it would be
okay.
additional kind of phase 3 on that site for our technical college in Northport.
So, okay, what in STC are you looking to expand to Northport?
I apologize. That would be a Ron DePillo question. I don't have that answer. I'm not sure
It
what
was
that was.
additional programs. So we built the campus in Northport.
Right.
And this was just like phase 2, expansion of programming down in Northport at the Technical Center South. And so this has been in there, but again, it was one of those, as he said, you have to earn it. So once the enrollment and the demand dictated that they needed additional facilities or whatever, then we would put it in there. So right now, it's just sitting in there.
So it's
For the
not for an additional program, just for expansion of the current programs?
I believe, and again, Mr. DePillo can answer this better, but I believe they were looking at bringing additional programs down to Northport, and this would be to do that.
Which would require more facility space.
I know that a truck driving school was talked about, CDL classes, things of that nature. But again, the specifics I am not aware of.
Okay. It's hard when you come and you tell us that and you don't have we don't know what it is that you're talking about. Shirley?
When exactly are we going to be putting the West Villages, the K-8 in high school in the plan? I mean, if it's not in the next 5 years, what are we looking at?
Well, that's a good question, and so we'll continue to look at that every year. We've put 2 additional portables on the Venice High campus this summer for anticipated growth. We'll have to see how we get impacted with students returning to school this year, and we'll continue to monitor that. If it looks like as we move into next year it needs to get on here in some form or fashion, we'll certainly have conversation with you and put it on here. At this point, we in planning did not see it being part of this 5-year plan. Now, it may be in year 6, maybe in year 7, and again, the next year will probably be critical in determining what that all looks like. We've got space, I believe, for 12 portables currently at Venice High School as we continue to grow down there. But again, it's going to be a yearly taking a look at what's going on in West Villages, what's going on in Venice with development, how quickly those houses are coming on, and how many students we're generating out of that project.
Bridget?
Thank you. I guess one of the bigger, just broader questions in general is we have to toe the line of not having the foresight that we have to continue with renovations and projects, but there's also the element of, do we freeze certain things? Now, I know if contracts have already been let and then there's cost prohibitive, essentially, if we're halfway through or what have you, if it's a multi-phase project. But when we talk about no changes, has that been evaluated from that standpoint?
So I think I understand your question, but if I'm wrong, stop me. In terms of all the projects you see here that are funded in 2020, 2021, for example, Booker Middle roofing, we are moving forward with that. Could it be stopped? Yes, we could have conversations about that. There are other projects here like Fruitvale Building 5 refresh. We have not begun yet, could be stopped. So I think, yes, certainly in the next 5-6 months as we move into this budget, there will be projects on here that we could, if we got into a situation, put a pause to. There may be some costs involved. We could discuss that. There may be some we haven't started yet that we could just say, let's delay them a year. So we could certainly have those conversations moving forward. Again, if not all of these projects are going to start tomorrow. And
Right.
so they'll be phased in as construction can handle them and we can get them planned correctly.
And just to follow up, just as we try to quantify the capital investments we'll need to do with the unknown. Again, if we don't have a volume of people within our buildings, there's a lot of different variables. I just want to make sure as a board, because I want to err on the side of being extraordinarily conservative. It doesn't mean no, not ever. We would be doing projects, but at the current moment, do they make sense? Because there's going to be potentially a lot of adjustments. So that's just my feeling on moving ahead.
We also have the ability to go out for cops. And we have plenty of room in our debt ceiling. We're not nowhere near where we as a board, and we're lower than what the state mandates. We have plenty of ability to do that. And especially for student stations, as you have reminded me, they have to be for student stations. So we can always go out for cops and do the student stations from there and free up some money if there was something else that came in that we wanted to do.
Any other comments,
No,
questions?
you could. No
Okay.
lights are on here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's transition and talk a little bit about the Booker High VPA project. That is currently funded based on a scope that you saw about a year ago or so for $7 million. And if you recall, that project scope is expanded to now include some additional phases that the school would like to see at their VPA. What we've done is, based on the new information we've got, we as a team went back. Ernie Dubose, who is our project manager, is on Zoom today, and he can talk a little bit more specifically about what you're going to see in front of you. Dr. Shelley is here too, as the principal of Booker High School. But wanted to take you back to each of the phases that we see are viable at this point, price them in today's current dollars and what it would take to do them, and then open it up to you as a board in terms of conversation. So I think we'll start with just having Ernie, if you would, Ernie, just walk us through, starting with the base schematic, which is the scope that the board originally approved, with the addition of some ADA upgrades, and then the additional options as we move forward. And again, maybe just talk very briefly about each one, Ernie, in terms of the total cost of those. Can you hear me? Are we good? Do you think you?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Can you
talk up a little bit, Ernie? A little bit soft.
How about now?
That's better. That's better.
Any
Still
better?
a little higher.
Okay. How about now?
Getting there.
Okay.
All right. So I'm not sure what the board can see. Do you have the packet?
Yes.
Yes, they got the pack in front of them.
Okay, so looking at the diagram that shows the floor plans, on that we included a couple, obviously key component is the budget, and then another key component of the process is the seating capacity. So the base scheme, what we have is the base scheme with ADA upgrades. That includes the base project that we were approved to execute, and also the ADA upgrades to bring the theater within full code compliance of ADA function. So one of the key components that changed the budget was exactly that. It was the ADA. We did not go into the project because, again, as you know, from where the project started with kind of a cosmetic facelift, as the project developed and the scope developed, we believed that we would not have to do any ADA upgrades. But as the project increased, as the scope increased, and as we brought the building official, Mike Foley, into the fold and into the project, we realized not only by code did we need to upgrade the ADA, but also it was just the right thing to do. So much of that budget increase going from 7 million to 8.9 is due to the ADA. And if you look at the base floor plan, if you've either been there, and we didn't include the base floor plan in this packet, we tried to keep it kind of simple, but the main key component is, you see, there's now an aisle with the ADA upgrades. There's an aisle that kind of splits the theater that allows for ADA seating and ADA access from one side to another. And so with that said, doing those ADA improvements was a key driver of the increase in that budget. The downside to the ADA increase is that we lose seats. So if we go from, our current capacity is at 426, and if you look by doing the ADA improvements, we lose about 51 seats. We have a loss of 51 seats from our current capacity. So again, the base scheme that you're looking at, and base scheme with ADA upgrades, $8.9 million budget. That's an all-in budget. That's design. That also includes $2 million in FF&E alone. So that's not just construction. That's the design. That's the FF&E. That's everything to get us to that end result. I'll move to the next scheme, which is simply it's the base scheme with the mezzanine option. So the reason why we reviewed this scheme was primarily to gain the seats back. So again, going from the 426 seats to 360, we obviously don't want that capacity loss if we don't have to. A key driver there is for them to have assemblies. Most of their class assemblies, whether it's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, et cetera, are held in the theater. So if we lose those seats, it puts them in jeopardy of simply being able, it's not even about performances, it puts them in jeopardy of simply being able to host class events in the theater and allowing all the students to attend and have somewhere to sit. So that drove us to look at the mezzanine scheme, which is option 1. That increases, that not only gains back the capacity, but it actually increases our capacity about approximately 50 seats. Again, what this does is it provides a second level seating. So you have the ADA improvements, the first floor seating, and then you have a second level seating to get us up to 476 seats. This budget is $11.2 million. Again, this includes FF&E. It includes the increased design cost to do the added scope and everything. This is an all-in budget that we've come up with. I'll go to the what we're calling option 2. So,
Ernie, before you leave there, could I ask you a question on that option 1, the mezzanine scheme where you increase the seating? Will that have an elevator in there so that you can get to the top seating?
Yes, it will. That's one of the cost drivers.
I don't see it in here, so I want to make sure, because I know.
Yeah, it's right up at the top. If you look at the top of the plan, the very top.
I see it up there.
Of that floor plan.
I see it. Thank you.
Yep. And again, whenever you deal with elevators, you're talking, minimum of 100,000, about 100,000 per floor, per stop. So that's an immediate driver of cost. Okay, so as far as the theater proper and the actual theater, those are the 2 options. Again, we tried to simplify it. The base option, it gets us the interior improvements, it gets us the ADA, but it costs a significant loss in seating capacity. The option 1, which is a mezzanine scheme, that gets us everything in the base scheme, the ADA, all the finish improvements, the expanded lobby out front, but it also rectifies the seating capacity issue. And it increases us to 476. So it's a gain of approximately 50 seats in that increase. that all-in budget is 11.2. So those are the two theater options. Beyond that is adding to the footprint. So the next option, what we're calling option 2, is the addition of the 2 classrooms. And again, going back, several years now, when we did the original rebuild, we didn't have the budget to address the theater at that time. And one of the issues were classroom capacity. It was because they're currently using locker rooms. The locker rooms are double dutying as classrooms. So adding these 2 classrooms would rectify that. It would allow those currently 2 locker rooms being used as classrooms. It would allow them to have those classrooms set aside by themselves. And again, the all-in budget for that is $12,059,000. The add to the budget is $785,000. So the 2 classrooms is a net plus 785. The third option, which is pretty much the final, we went ahead and included, instead of having all these separate small pieces broken out. The third option is, again, is more so the master plan. That's the what's needed now and in the future. That includes the black box. That includes the expanded exhibition center. It includes costume area. Right now, one of the struggles is they don't have a proper place to store costumes. So again, this option 3, it's not just the black box. It's the black box in addition to prop area, costume area, a green room, and expanded exhibition hall. And again, that total budget, all in for the total project, is $22,535,725.
Thank you, Ernie. Are there any questions about
Mrs.
the
Brown?
phases?
Shirley, rather.
Yes, I have a question on the option 3 with the black box. I'm not seeing the classroom building on here.
It's on the.
Yep.
It's on 2.
It's on 2. So it is included in option 3?
Absolutely. Option 3 includes everything discussed.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I wasn't seeing it here, so it includes, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Yes. Jane?
So we started out really with the project as we originally intended, which was to add capacity to, we're looking at the front facade, weren't we?
Yeah, so
And we all thought that needed to be updated. Well, ADA is not usually an option. ADA compliance is important that we do that. It's important that we always keep up to date with ADA compliance. So anytime you have a substantial renovation, you must use and abide by whatever's required to bring the building up to code for ADA compliance. So that's always a good thing. So we go from option 1 originally to an enhanced option 1 with mezzanine to the classroom addition and the black box theater along with the front facade. So we're coming out with really quite a unique, special place. I think if there's some way that we can do this, I would be in favor of it, and here's why. Students in a visual and performing arts school require place to perform. The main thing that they need to do, not only classroom time and tap dancing at the bar with the dance instructor and all those other beautiful things that they do in the hallway and in their classrooms, but they need a place to perform and very often an audience. And we need, and we know from past experiences, and I've talked to various people at Booker. I haven't talked to Dr. Shelley, I'm sorry to say, because I meant to call and then I thought she was out of town and so forth, but I think I get what she's attempting to do, but I would be in favor of this and doing the whole thing at one time to prevent us from back and forth and so forth if there's some way to do it. I think it's an important aspect of visual and performing arts. I think it's an important aspect of that community and helping us to achieve a great deal of things that are necessary in today's visual and performing arts. So it would be a great thing to me. So that's my story.
So I look at Booker High School on this edition and option 3. I've spent a lot of years there because both of my grandsons have gone there and have gone through the VPA program, and I still have one there. So I understand where we started from. We started from not even having sufficient light bulbs. If a light bulb blew out during the performance, there was no light bulbs there in order to replace it. That's how we started out when my older grandson was there 7 years ago. And we've come a long way, but we still need a long way to go. These kids are being prepared for the world of work. A lot of them are going on to college, but a lot of them are going to work. A lot of them will go out into New York. I know Nick, who's in the audience, he works there, but he also performs and does lighting, and he taught my son how to do lighting. So you're learning more than just visual and performing arts. You're learning life skills, trades that you can use outside of the school, where you don't need a 4-year college degree, but you could have one, which is what my grandson is trying to do. So, and the other one's a musician. So I've been in the band room. There's not enough room in the band room in order for them to perform, to practice. I mean, they're on top of one another. The costume room is squished together. You can't even get to the costumes. It's so bad. And there's just no extra space. Dr. Shelley has utilized every extra space in that building to do what she's been able to do. And it's been a magnificent job. Besides the VPA, you have all the other programs that are there as well. So I don't want us to get just lost that it's just VPA. But VPA to me is the beginning. It's part of the arts, and it's part of instructing our kids, and it's just making them think a different way. Both my boys are brainiacs, and they've gone through Booker High School, and they've learned not only to be self-sufficient and to take care of everyone on the outside, but they've learned to utilize their giftedness because of being in there and being exposed to this theater. It's more than just a theater. It is much more than that. It is a training ground for our future in the Arts Society. So I'm in favor of this. Of course, you would know that I would be in favor of it, having lived there for about 7 years. So I just hope we can see a way to do this. Bridget?
Thank you. Well, going kind of in the consistency of what I just said, even on all of our capital projects, I believe, I don't want us to be short-sighted, but we are also in a territory where it is just so incredibly unknown that, similar, and I know I said this before, on a lot of projects, even when we look at 2021 and 2020 and 21, I believe we need to be scrupulously going through there and seeing which ones we need to do for asset capital preservation, and then ones that can be held maybe to a future date as we have a better forecast of what we will need to be spending our money on and or what our revenue impact could be. I do know we can borrow, but not on this case, I believe, because of the student station is my understanding.
But wait, excuse me, if I could answer you? Never mind, go ahead.
Sure.
I'll answer you later.
Yeah, so that is just my overall, and that has nothing to do with this particular project or other ones. That is as an overall arching theme as we go through, and there's still, and this pains me because this is just one more example about how devastating this COVID issue has come, because it has absolutely decimated the performing arts community and all of that. And that kills me, because I can promise you, and I'll be very clear, when we even go through our plan, to think that we have to consider eliminating so many arts programs or reducing them is something that I want to say is unacceptable, because I think it is so incredibly imperative to our children's enriched enriching education, and it value. I can't even put it into words how important I know that is. So, but this is the trade-offs that we have to find ourselves facing right now, and so it is frustrating. And I have no doubt that, and I know what VPA, how special it is at Booker. It is, and I know I truly believe it's a place that people come from all around the world. I know I've said it, that I've brought family there, that it literally feels like it's off Broadway, and it's amazing, and that makes me so proud. But then at the same time, we have to sit in this position and make some really, really tough decisions. And what I at this point could not support that, and it doesn't, and I've said this and very transparently and very heartfelt, it doesn't mean no, not never. It just, in my opinion, is no, not now, and that is the conversation where I believe, at least you'll hear me consistently probably saying that, until we have a better sense. I think we need to make sure that, so that's kind of where I stand. And it gives me a lot of heartburn to say that, because I think it underscores the positions and the very, very tough decisions we're making. But I also, and this is not specific to this project, but and again, I want to make sure we go through every single capital expenditure to make sure they're warranted, because I don't want, we all have 100 maybe emails an hour at this point with variety of concerns about what we're facing, and I don't want us to be tone deaf to certain things and challenges as we make these decisions. So that's my opinion, and I hope you can appreciate where I'm coming from. It has not a direct impact on any particular project. It's just what I believe is our responsibility at this current time.
Shirley?
I'd like to echo the words from some of my colleagues, except perhaps a clarification from what Ms. Goodwin said. When she said that their students need to go to the bar and dance, she was talking about that bar in front of the mirror.
Oh, that kind of, you're thinking of.
But you know where mine goes. And what Ms. Zucker said, we're getting these kids to be college and career ready, and we're at a school that we really need to be looking at and putting our effort into to make sure that Booker High is an outstanding school that kids definitely want to come to, and that kids need to succeed when they leave. But there is that question about the funding. Can we not use COPS funding for this?
No, we couldn't, but so a couple options. Let me just go back to what Ms. Ziegler was saying. As we take a look at the projects that are funded for next year, and I go down them in my mind, there are not a lot of projects on there that we can pull off and say that's not capital asset preservation. So I don't know that there are a lot of projects we could say that doesn't make any sense to do right now. I think they all kind of do. I think if we are talking about adding any money to the Booker High project, you're going to have a discussion about borrowing, and that is going to have to be a discussion about borrowing for something like a Go Show that's currently set to be a pay-as-you-go project. We'd have to borrow for that project, which is additional capacity on campus, and then free up some money for Booker High. If you were looking at an option where you wanted to just increase the base option to include the seatings to the $8.9 million, we could dip into the fund reserve. So I think there are some options if you want to move, but I think in all cases you're going to have to look at giving us a feel for where, if that's the way you want us to go, what do we do to get the additional revenue into the system? The other option, and let me just lay this out there for you now, is we could delay the project. I mean, Ernie, we have spent money on design. We could continue and get the project designed, and then we could pause the project until next fiscal year and see what our revenue stream looks like at that point, and then could we take, what options could we do to kind of fit that into the revenue stream at that particular point? So this project has not kicked off in terms of breaking any ground yet, so if the board said, hey, we want to look at the entire project, we're a little bit worried about what that looks like right now, but can we take a breath? Can we look at it next year at this time and see what that looks like in terms of revenue? That's also, I think, an option too.
As a follow-up, I'm not seeing it in this capital plan that we have where it's listed, but, I mean, could we look at the Pineview classroom ring for $14 million? I mean, would that be something that we could add to the bond? And
The project's already underway. That's
Okay.
just the balance of the funding. So
We couldn't.
It's already been designed and under construction. This is just, it was funded over 2 years.
Yeah, to me, the only project that would kind of fit that category that's not started yet, although it's 2 years of funding, we have the first year done already. In terms of funding, the second year's coming now. It would be the Goshio project. We could look at going out for COPS on that project. We haven't started yet, if that's the will of the board.
I would like to see us move forward with it, if at all possible.
Is there any thought to doing, like, including the base scheme, the mezzanine, as one project? So that would be an additional budget of $4.2 million to the current year, 2020, 2021, which we would either add the Goshio project into the COPS borrowing for the, so we would change the COPS borrowing from 55 to 61. And then maybe in year 2, when we have additional fund balance capacity, or year 3, we would put in the classroom wing and the black box theater. So it would be still one project, it's just funded in 2 phases, 2021, 22, 2020, too many twos, 2022, 23, or something like that, so that when we have enough available funds to then fund out the balance of it. So we get $6.5 million, which covers what we need to get through, including the mezzanine. And then, I guess we could do the classroom edition too, and then add the black box in the second one, in the second,
So
2 years from now or something.
So if you wanted my opinion, I don't know that it matters,
Not yet.
but if you wanted my opinion, I think that makes a lot of sense, because what it does is it allows us to work within our current budget and try and reallocate some money around to get what I think is everything within the theater proper done and completed with the ADA upgrades, the original scope we anticipated, but it allows allows Dr. Shelley to keep that capacity in the theater itself. Ernie and team have done a great job of designing the classroom and the black box and all that other stuff to come later in a way that it's not affected by, if we pick phase 1, phase 2 now and get the theater done, we're not going to be spending bad money and have to tear stuff out to go do the second section. So I think we also could do that, and I think that makes a lot of sense to step our way into the project if that's what you'd like to do.
And at the $6.5 million, you could add, it's $5 million total additional budget over what's already appropriated if you add the classroom addition. So if we move $6.5 million into the borrowing for Goshio, you have that capacity. It's just that extra large $10 million bullet that's kind of.
We definitely need the classrooms. Eric?
Is Ms. Brown done?
No, she came back in after.
I didn't know if Ms. Brown was done.
I got it here.
Okay. I think we should do this, but I agree that we need to do this in phases. I also think we talked about at the last meeting, look at maybe going out to the community like we did in Venice to try to raise money. And don't forget, we're going to have Sarasota High right after this. And they're going to be coming saying, you gave $20 million to Booker High. Where's my $20 million? And we can't sit there and say, well, Venice High had to raise half, Booker High doesn't, but Sarasota High, you're going to have to raise half. We're going to get a lot of people in our here about that issue. I'm also concerned about I think we need to add some things onto the CIP plan. Ms. Goodwin brought it up earlier that as a side note, but we need to be looking at our air conditioning systems and upgrading them and maybe putting UV lights, and I don't know how much that's going to cost. I think we're going to have some, and we kind of discussed it earlier, I think we're going to have some additional capital costs, and if we don't, we should, as a result of this pandemic. I agree, performing arts is important, but safety and security of our schools is also. And right now, we need to be doing everything we can to be retrofitting our schools so that teachers, staff, students, and the community is going to feel safe coming in here. I've had teachers come to me and say, listen, I can smell the teacher 3 classrooms down popping popcorn through the ventilation. And so they're worried, even if their classroom is doing everything appropriately, they're worried about the classroom next to them of community spread, of the airborne COVID. And so those kind of things, I think we need to be cognizant of and looking at additional costs for that. is that going to mean that other projects that we've been planning for may be delayed? I think yes. I mean, we got to prioritize is safety and health of our staff and students. Where do we rank that? And for me, I rank that as number one. But I don't see those type of projects on this list. I know this is a rolling item, but these are the things that we need to be addressing. These are if we're going to borrow money, if we had to borrow money, I want to borrow money. I don't like borrowing money. I want to say that first of all. But if we didn't have any money left and we could only borrow for a project, I would want to do something to make our schools safer. I'm really concerned about what we're going to do to stop the spread of COVID, and it's a real problem. And if people don't feel safe, if teachers don't come back to school because we're not willing to do those kind of things, that's going to be disastrous for our school district. I just firmly believe that we need, if nothing else, than public perception. The people need to feel safe and actually be safe. And when we do these type of projects, if we do, I'm only one school board member, we need to make sure we communicate it out to the community, the staff and students, so they know what's happening, and so that increases the likelihood that they're going to feel comfortable coming into the school system and not be afraid. So I would rather see our money spent on improving the security and safety of the school. But I still think that we should do this, but the safety and security should be first. I agree that we should do this in phases. I also think that we should go out to the community and elicit support and funds from the community. So I look forward to you adding things onto the project, Jody, for the safety and security of our staff.
No, I appreciate that very much, and I think you were all copied on a response I sent the other day regarding HVAC systems, and I know we're going to talk more about this in terms of reopening, but the one good thing is you as a board have invested very heavily in asset maintenance over the last year since I've been here. That's been a great decision on the board's part. It puts us in good position with mechanical equipment. Typically, our mechanical equipment now is bringing in 15 to 20% outside air, so whenever we're air conditioning a space, that space is being flushed continuously throughout the day. That's a good thing, and in some cases we can actually ramp that up even more, and so we're looking at that. That's a good thing. In terms of UV lights, it would be a major expense, and it's one of those things where I'm not sure how much benefit we get from a major expense like that. We would be retrofitting every air handler in the district. That's thousands and thousands of air handlers. It's certainly nothing we could get done to start school. And so my thought process on that is let's wait. Let's make sure that there's a cost benefit to doing that in all of our schools. Certainly, I think as we discuss school opening, there are mitigation factors that we can do that we're all doing here today, like wear a mask that may be more effective than a UV light and cost much less. So again, understood. A lot of people are talking about UV lights. It's certainly something we want to explore. I'm just not sure we want to jump head over heels into a project that's going to cost us millions until we know that we're having a viable impact on the health and safety of students in those classrooms. So again, that would be my one quick comment on that, but understood 100%.
Thank you. Jane?
Well, understanding these things, it is, this project in particular is a matter of equity for me, because I want these students in the northern part of our county to have this option. So if it takes doing it in 2 cycles, here's the concern I have in doing it in 2 phases. It costs more money. I mean, it may cost $20 million on this plan, but will it cost $25 million when we wait? So it always costs more. So I think that there's a number of things that we need to really look at from a standpoint and a lens of safety and the protocols for COVID and those kinds of things as well. So, I think we need to have another conversation about the capital budget. I'm not ready to say yay or nay. The Goshio project's very important to that school, and I think is very necessary. There's other projects like Pineview who've been waiting for years on. There's just all kinds of projects that are really important. I think about my little kindergarten building down in Inglewood Elementary and how they've been looking forward to that for, maybe I've been walking through that school for 5 years and hearing them say, no, you can't go to the bathrooms in this building. But I just think, I think we need to have another I think we have another special meeting, special couple of hours on the capital budget.
Okay.
Shirley?
Again, I'm agreeing with most of what I've heard. I think now is a good time to go forward with this project because, you know, we're going to shut the theater down. And because of COVID, they're not able to show any productions there anyway. So for that reason, I think it would be a good time to go ahead with this. As far as the UV lights, when we moved back into this house that we had, the air conditioning, the ducts and everything were just nasty inside. And we put the UV lights in, and you wouldn't believe it was the same one. I mean, it really took a lot of that ick out that was inside of there. And I was talking to someone who actually supplies those things to air conditioning. It's a local company. And I believe that for a home, they're like $100 a piece. I don't know, for a school, it'd be much larger. But they do have to be replaced. But I think, isn't that something that would be covered under the FEMA, that we wouldn't have to take it right out of our capital?
I'm not going to go on record either way. We'd have to do some research on that to see if that would comply with the FEMA reimbursement. I'm not sure that it would.
Well, I would like to look at the long term, because it really made a difference looking at our ductwork after we put that UV light in, and weigh the pros and cons on that, and if we could get reimbursement on that, I would really like to know some background. And I know there's some UV lights that can be in the room that won't affect the eyes, but perhaps if we could look into that a little more, I would like it to hear more, and I think Mr. Robinson would too.
We definitely could do that. We can bring that back to you.
But I would like to
Absolutely.
move this forward.
Well, it sounds like what I'm hearing is we've got some work to do in terms of how
I'm
we...
not finished.
sorry.
I have one person, and I would like to comment also. So I'm sorry, Jody, not to cut you off, but I have to make sure that everybody has their say here, including me. I would not like to delay this project, and the reason is that because we delay, and it's right, it only costs more, and the theater is closed down right now. I definitely don't want to stop doing what we're doing, even if we have to say that we will do the first part of it all the way up till the Black Box Theater, putting in the classrooms in there, which I know they're desperately needed. So I would like to propose that we move that forward and maybe hold on abeyance the last section of it, which is the Black Box Theater. So if we can move forward with the rest of it and then put the Black Box Theater in here, in the 5-year plan, and to look at it again, but make sure that those classrooms are in there and the upstairs, the mezzanine, and all that is in there. That's what I would be happy with. And I heard something here that got me. Reduced arts program? Who talked about reducing arts program? You did, sure. But what programs are we reducing, Missy?
No, we're not. We're not.
Whenever you want to.
I will, as soon as I'm finished.
You did something.
I did. I wrote it down. Somebody said reduced.
Okay.
Under distance learning.
Yeah.
So, to understand where I'm coming from, I'm okay with, I think that would be all right with Dr. Shelley as well, to do those phases and do the Black Box Theater at a later time, but making sure it's in the 5-year plan. Bridget.
Okay. Well, first, let me clarify the one part, because I don't want any misunderstanding.
No,
There is not a removal or a suggestion removal, but there are certainly concerns in the community that please don't get rid of arts programs as we figure out our distance learning. There's absolutely and no one's suggesting that for everyone watching. But as you evaluate what our distance learning or social distancing or what it looks like in the future for arts programs in general, particularly choir or dance or theater, and this is not just Sarasota County, this is everywhere, it has been absolutely decimated. But there have been some really amazing and very moving, by the way, creative virtual elements that have been, displayed. But that's what I was saying, is that we as a school board in a community who are so supportive of the arts, the heartburn that we're going to have to go through some of these decisions and realize it's going to have an impact on the arts particularly, but no one is removing them. So just want to make sure that's clear. One thing I wanted to, so two things. I agree with Mrs. Goodwin. I think that, we do, not that we need, but it's an unusual time or if we need to have additional meetings, but I think we do need to really dive in from the capital standpoint. And ironically, we're having this discussion before we go into the reopening plans to even quantify some of the decisions and capital impacts that they may have. I think it may make, in my opinion, it makes sense to go the other way. And I think it's very similar, if you recall, at post-Parkland, is we had to reevaluate everything from an infrastructure standpoint, from a safety and health, from a safety standpoint. This is a little different, actually a lot different, but from an approach, I think that's where, as a board, we may need to be looking at it like that, and then quantify what the financial impact is going to be for our capital projects that we may need to respond to however we move forward with our opening plans, and then seeing where we can fit this into the budget, or, as Mr. Robinson said also, is trying to see if there are other members of the community. I absolutely agree that there are a number of renovation projects that are continued full steam ahead, and it's advantageous because the buildings aren't occupied, but those are different. I mean, I think that's evaluating each project on what we need, but I think we have a huge question mark in front of us, and that is why I think it makes more sense to let's go towards talking about what that financial impact is going to look like, and then how can we embed this into it. I think it gives us more foresight insight into the future, as well as we don't know what our revenues are going to be. Final thing is I don't know, Mitzi, but would the CARES Act potentially help fund from the AC units, or?
I mean, they could. It's all additional expenses, but to be perfectly honest, I prefer every penny of CARES Act fund go to help and support the general fund and not the capital fund.
Okay, I think that from a capital standpoint, it's going to be embedded into a lot of our opening plans, but.
Agreed.
As I'm seeing in here, there are 3 HVAC on the agenda. One is Sarasota High chiller, Tuttle Elementary chiller, Englewood building is on here, and that's for this 2021. Englewood is built in here. So those are things that you are talking about are in the capital budget. So again, Dr. Shelley cannot go out and solicit any more money. She is intent on, right now, she has to go out and solicit funds for her students. And so to make sure that she has a whole program going right now where she's raising funding in order to get her kids to go to college and to be successful. I mean, we can't expect her. She doesn't have the same clientele as our other high schools do. So her ability to raise $7.5 million, and the city of Sarasota has already said that it will not. So, I mean, that's a no already, so that's where you would go. So, I mean, I think it's our responsibility as we provide for the other schools, the other high schools, and I know that Sarasota High will be next coming to us, and that will be addressed at Sarasota High. But I think we owe it to the students at Booker High School to give them the best studio that they can learn, where they can learn and be ready to take their trade and be able to produce their trade right from school. I still would hope that we could do, maybe not, as I said before, not the black box theater, but at least put in there the ADA, the 12, option 2 with the classroom additions, $12,059. That's what I would hope we would do. And then put the other, the option 3 with the black box and extending the walls and all of that for a further discussion. Shirley.
I'm I'm wondering if perhaps we could look at tourist development tax dollars, because I know we get people from out of the area coming to that. Of course, those dollars are down now, and, you know, it's kind of a bad time to be going to them, but, you know, the worst they can say is no. And, you know, and if Mr. Robinson knows of anyone that would like to contribute to this, maybe we could set up something through the Education Foundation or something.
How about we all chip in? $4 million each.
Is that it, Shirley? So I do not hear 3 people wishing to go forward.
There's 3 people.
Let me ask this. Let me clarify. Just make sure that I understand what you're asking. Maybe I can clarify a little bit. So our next workshop in August, that would give us a little bit of time to kind of take what you've all said today and try and work through what this might look like. It gets us down the road a little bit farther with what are some of the things we're going to have to do for COVID response. It's not going to hurt Ernie in terms of timeline. We can work all that out. So why don't you let us push this to the next workshop? We will run through some scenarios based on what you've had conversations on today, bring it back to you to take a look at in August. Does that seem to make some sense?
No. I would like us to move forward with the phrases that you put in here, which you said in private conversations that we could do. We could do the up to option, not option 3, option 2. Including the classroom additions. Why can't we move forward with just that and put the other one, which is the major expense, put that for further discussion?
If the board would like us to do that, we could make that work.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yes.
But perhaps Dr. Shelley would like to speak. I know she's here. Does you have anything that you might like to add to this?
Yes, I would love for her to speak. I don't want her to get in trouble, though. No, come on, Dr. Shelley, come on up and speak.
Who's going to give her trouble? That's us. We're going to protect her.
Be over.
Just make sure the red light's on.
It's almost 12 o'clock.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's still morning? Yes, good morning. I'd like to speak a little louder.
There we go. All righty, here we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here this morning to talk about Booker High School. I think sometimes people get confused about what it is at Booker High School we're talking about. And so for the members that are in the audience and those that are out viewing, let me clarify a couple of things. Booker High School is now celebrating its 50th year for our theater program. It started when a school board member just like yourself, Gerald Strickland, stepped down from being a school board member back in 1970, and we were in the height of integration. He decided that he was going to create a visual performing arts program, a program at Booker High School. When you look at our theater right now, it is 27 years old. It is outdated. I want to clarify one thing. When we had an opportunity to speak to our former superintendent about Booker High School and the rebuild, I mentioned the things that we're talking about today. So that was not new information. Unfortunately, I was told absolutely no, it's not going to happen. So we landed where we landed. So I wanted to clarify how we got to this point. Booker High School currently serves 1,300 students. Out of the 1,300 students, more than 40% of them are involved in a visual performing arts program. The VPA program itself, it is unique. It is not like Sarasota High School. It's not like Venice. It's not like Northport. You have students that are committed to the arts. They spend 3 hours a day in their program, in their profession. No other school in Sarasota County has that unique experience. There are visual performing arts programs throughout this country. They do have a black box theater and another area for their students. Here's the difference. Our wonderful theater itself, and for the sake of this conversation, let me just call the theater Strickland's Theater Performing Arts Center. I'll use that name. That is a large facility where we put on a variety of shows. And not only Booker High School, but we partner with Southside, we partner with Sarasota School of the Arts, we partner with a lot of organizations. They come in and utilize that huge facility that accommodates 426 seats. It's a stand-up, deliver, show performance. but we're a performing arts school. Other performing arts schools, they do have that black box theater. That allows our students to have an opportunity to engage in their practice, put on shows for a smaller group. You can't do that over here. Our theater is often booked up. It's hard to get in. So our students don't have an opportunity to perform. Let me also share this with you. This is the first time in Booker High School's history starting this year, even in the midst of pandemic, and I know you guys have a tough decision to make. I'm just going to plead for Booker High School. You get to decide. But I will share this with you. We have 5 different programs that utilize that building itself, the Strickland building. That's not the VPA program, that's a building. And out of those 5 programs, the first time in our school history, where we're also offering all of those to non-VPA students, including theater. First time in our history, non-VPA students, but where would they perform? Now that they've gone through training, we know what art says about dropout prevention rate, we know that. I also want to share with you, you mentioned equity. Out of our 1,300 students, you know the stats. But I will share this with you, something you may not know. 50% of the African American students in Sarasota County in high school attend Booker High School. We are advocating for a program that would allow them to stand and perform. You get to decide. You get to decide. So I hear what you're saying. I get it. You think I'm worried and concerned about what's going to happen on the 3rd and the 10th for my students and myself? Absolutely I am. Absolutely. Do I believe our academic officer, chief officer, and that team put together a wonderful program that will help our students and staff transition? Yes. But do I have other concerns? Absolutely. So I get that. But I also believe now is the time for us to start thinking about Booker High School. It should have been done when they renovated the building, but they did not. We did not get a brand new gym. Every other high school did. We did not. We took our weight room and renovated. We did not. Yes, when you walk on our campus, it's absolutely beautiful. But there are some things that was not included in our renovation that should have been included. I wasn't the principal then, but it should have been included. So I'm asking for now what should have been included 10 years ago. When you go into our performing arts program, would it take 5 people to pull down cords and get connected? You go into the other schools, you push one button, and it's done. So yes, I am advocating for Booker High School for package 3, but if we can't get option 3, we can definitely settle for option 2. Who has a classroom that's a dressing room? Scott Keys, Sonny Smith, and all of our VPA theater students that are in those classes because their classrooms are inside of the theater building. They don't have a regular sized classroom, but yet they are held to the same standards and curriculum every other teacher has. So when it's time for them to write out an essay and address their standards, they have to use the book and sit on the floor because their classroom is a dressing room. So with that being said, thank you, and you have a tough decision to make. I will live with option 2. And Bridget, I get you, I hear you, I understand, I support that, I appreciate that. But at the same time, I understand what we need at Booker High School, and that is what we need option 3. We'll live with option 2, because I need classrooms. And we'll be able to have even more students at Booker High School. 10 years ago, we had 856 students, and now we have 1,300. And more than 50% of them are involved in a visual performing arts program, taking something at Booker High School. We are the Visual Performing Arts Center. So I hope you decide that you would think about that and decide to fund us and give us what Booker High School so rightfully deserves. Thank you.
Before you go, Dr. Shelley, thank you for that impassioned speech. You know, some of our hearts are with you. Maybe I think all of our hearts are with you. But, you know, if you wouldn't mind, you put the camera back on her, please. Do you see what she's wearing? She's wearing a face shield that she purchased online for, I think you said $1.80 a piece. Face shields are what the CDC is now saying. A face shield and a mask give you much more protection because the cloth mask doesn't keep out all of the micro little things, and especially if somebody sneezes at you, that gives some more. And apparently they were like rather inexpensive. Now, you bought them for everyone at your school? all your teachers?
Bridget, because I was very concerned about Booker High School, we created a care package for my staff when they returned back on August the 3rd. And so, yes, we did purchase these for $1.80, and they go right on the glasses for our students. I work very closely with Dr. Washington Hill, who is a member of our task force, and he explained to me that it's very important for us to have a shield and a mask for my teachers. And so we gave them masks, thanks to a wonderful donor that we have, Mr. Robinson, for Teacher Appreciation. So they have masks as well as a shield. So yes, we are very, very concerned. That's just two of many items that we are preparing for our teachers, Ziegler, because I'm very concerned about safety for my teachers, and we're doing everything we can, and I'm advocating for a theater as well.
And I think that's something that we could help the schools buy, because couldn't they get reimbursed through the FEMA or something for those things if the schools wanted them?
So we already have face shields so we are stocking up in the warehouse for all of the PPE that we think we're going to need that we can provide. Again, you're going to help us get there today in terms of what we're providing in terms of policy, but we already have all of this stocked up in the warehouse. We can bring in more, and so we feel like we're ready to go. We obviously know that putting teachers in front of kids, we got to have them feel safe, we got to have them feel comfortable, and so whatever we can do to do that, we're going to try and do. So face shields are an option, masks are an option, both are an option, and so we want to make sure we're prepared to do what we need to do. So, heard you.
That's it. Any questions for me? Yes.
Turn myself off. Before we leave this subject, I know that we need to give the superintendent direction. So, are we moving forward with the plan with that includes the dressing rooms, and we're not delaying it, and we'll delay the black box theater? Is that what I'm hearing? From 3 people at least? Yes. Okay, so there's your direction.
Okay, so let me just confirm. So we will be looking at doing some additional borrowing for like a go-show to be able to free up some money to make that happen for you.
Okay.
Okay?
And you're coming back in August with some other numbers too, right?
We can do that.
So
Okay.
just so I have clarification, because you are going to be voting on next Thursday, to approve advertisement of all of the budgets, including the capital budget. So we'll go back and make these modifications. We won't have all of the modifications, because again, we'll talk in August, but again, final budget's not approved till September. So
Right.
it's just a tentative budget, but I just wanted to make sure that everything else we're going to talk about today, I'm not sure we'll be able to get costed out or incorporated into the budget, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're on to schools reopening. Thank you, Dr. Shelley and Nicholas, for being here today.
So on to the topic that's everyone is interested in hearing about. So Michael Drennan from the Health Department has joined us. He's in that little box over there. Hi, Michael.
Hello, everybody.
And so what we did is, the plan's pretty lengthy. So we have actually just provided or created a PowerPoint to just kind of go through the summary items of the plan. So we'll just kind of walk through those. Thanks. So basically, the first page is just the guidance that we've received over the summer from Governor DeSantis on different items. And then on July 6th, we met on July 2nd, and we had a special meeting just to discuss school reopening. And then we broke for the 4th of July week, and on Monday, we received a emergency order that told us that we must open brick and mortar in August. So the wheels were then set in motion, and we all started meeting again to revise our plans and figure out what our next steps would be.
Ms. Corcoran, do we have a PowerPoint? It's not coming up on our presenter option, so.
I don't know.
I don't know if it's just my computer. Okay, so no one, okay.
Is it not back there? Does it have to be back there?
I can turn around. All right, just was wondering. I didn't know if anyone else's computer was working.
No, they're right here on the TV screens here also.
It's also behind me.
Well, she doesn't have to turn around.
I can see that over there.
No worries. Where do I just
Presenters, give me 1 second to get.
continue? No worries. I can.
Okay.
They're going to run some copies quick for you, so you got it in front of you.
Yeah, don't hold off on it. I can.
Okay. So going to the next slide, these were the considerations with regards to the reopening of schools. These were all things we considered when the task force originally began meeting, and they're no different today. These are just all of the different items that we were contemplating in their different sections in the reopening plan. We are currently, Sarasota County is in phase 2. Every district except for 3 districts in South Florida are in phase 2.
Okay.
Are in phase 2. So right now we can have gatherings of 50 or less people. South Florida is still in phase 1, which is 10 people or less. So we have some updated survey results. So we've provided you with some survey information as of July 2nd. The survey has stayed open for our parents. And when you compare them, interestingly enough, as far as my child returning to school in person, it went on the 2nd, it was at 74%, and as of yesterday, it's still 73%. So, and then the remote schooling went up by 1%. It was just an offset. There's been no change as far as the virtual programming. As far as face coverings between the 2nd and today, the number or the percentage who said yes has gone from 62 to 63%. And this is an increase of respondents of about 2,000 more people. Transportation, there's another percentage who have said that they will be having their child ride the school bus versus not having their child ride the school bus. And I think there was no change as far as the drive and pickup percentages. So then, as of the 2nd, when you guys had requested that we survey our employees, we pushed out a survey on the 3rd. Before we left, we had 3,978 employees respond. And so these are their results. We asked them the same questions we asked you from a policy perspective. And again, this was July 3rd, before we were informed that we had to open brick and mortar in the month of August. So when we had met with you on the 2nd, we asked you for 3 different options to weigh while we were gone during the break, which was to open traditional brick and mortar with safety precautions, open traditional brick and mortar and provide remote learning options, or open remotely and return to traditional brick and mortar after Labor Day or later. So this is the survey results we received from the staff, with 28% willing to return to brick and mortar, 28% brick and mortar with remote, and 43% wanting to wait and only open remotely. And then the last survey item, it was just a quick 2-question survey of the staff, and it was with regard to face coverings, so shields or masks. And this is 49% mandatory for students and staff, with 29% strongly recommended but mandatory during transitions and on the bus when you cannot safely distance apart. 20% strongly recommended, and only 2% for mandatory. So those were kind of the options or the results of the employee surveys that we received. So on July 2nd, we had asked you for those 3 options. Apparently, option 3, while it's still on this sheet, based upon the emergency order, would not be allowed to take place. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Jody and Laura to kind of run through the different planning items, the things that we, are going to be putting in place in terms of safety precautions in the various buildings.
Thank you. On this next slide, what we've tried to do is just run through some of the safety precautions that we're taking as a district as we move into this next phase. Actively encourage employees and students who are sick to stay home. Certainly, that's our first barrier. We want to make sure we educate everybody. If you've got a fever, if you're sick, please do not come to school. Do not come to work. Face coverings. We've said that a number of times. That's certainly one of the policy decisions we're going to need from you today in terms of what we're doing with face coverings. We'll insert here when we know what you'd like us to do with face coverings. Teach and reinforce proper hand washing techniques among student staff. Again, and Michael can jump in where he wants here, but I think it's some of the simple things that we need to continue to encourage and provide time for students to do on a continual basis, as we did before we shut down. Encourage use of hand sanitizer, provide desk barriers for all students. Again, you saw the dividers that we've purchased. We've got those available for all students. Those will be going out as soon as they're delivered. Clean and disinfect frequently touch surfaces within schools and on school buses daily or in between uses as needed. Certainly one of the things that we're trying to do is bring more custodians onto day shifts so that we can do touch points and things during the day. We will also be providing in each classroom the Alpha Cleaner so that throughout the day, desks can be continually wiped down, light switches can be continually wiped down. So we want to certainly focus on that. Then at the end of the day, make sure we're providing a clean, sanitized environment from the custodians for everybody to return the next day. One of the things we're really working on, we've talked about socially safe distancing as much as possible in schools, and so we will be, in the next few weeks, talking about what are the essential items that need to be in a classroom, and then trying to space desks out as far as possible to achieve as much space between individuals in classrooms. That's going to be going forward before we start school. The other thing is to really suspend anybody who's non-essential from coming onto a campus. So we're going to, I know Dr. Kingsley and her team have really looked at who are only the essential people that need to be on campus. If it's non-essential, we're not going to allow you on campus at this time. Again, trying to minimize contact with students. And then one of the things we're going to ask is when you arrive on campus, when parents are dropping off students, is to drop your student in the car loop and then proceed off of campus. We really want to eliminate the interaction of a lot of people coming into buildings, and so we're going to try and focus with parents on, drop your student in the parent loop and then move on and let the student come in on their own. So those are just some of the things that we're looking at. There will be more, certainly probably added to this list, but those are the biggies at this time that we're considering moving forward with as we pursue opening schools.
Mrs. Shirley.
2 issues on that. One of them is removing those unnecessary items from the classrooms. I think we talked previously, but how are the teachers going to know that there's some things in their classrooms that might be their personal things, or like they might have gotten through the our space or whatever they do that they've purchased that are in the classrooms that aren't going to work anymore?
So that's feedback over the next, certainly we have a principal meeting tomorrow, so we'll start talking about those things, and as we work closer to staff coming back, we'll make sure that principals and staff at school sites understand what those items are. We will be there to assist. So, for example, I was in a classroom the other day, and there was a couch in the classroom. Those are the types of items that we're going to have taken out of the classroom. If they're teachers' personal items and we need to assist removing that, we certainly will. But we will have to educate everybody as they start to come back in terms of how we need to space students out in classrooms. So that's going to be a big push when teachers return, is to make sure those classrooms are set up correctly.
And the other is the drop-off. I would imagine if we're asking parents to drive their kids so that they don't have to be on the bus, I mean, I know the first week or two of school, even at the high schools, the traffic is backed up into the street. And so that's an issue. And then, where will these students know where to go? I mean, normally we have Meet the Teachers. I mean, are we still going to be able to do that? So are the kids just going to be dumped at the front desk, and where do they go? So drop off.
So have confidence in your administrators, because they want everyone to know where they are going. And they'll be working on some virtual options at, all of the grade levels. Kindergarten, they're going to try to space the kids out so children get to come in and meet their teacher with their family, with safe distancing and few children coming. Parent pickup and drop-off is going to be the community is going to have to be very patient with us. We did talk with administrators this morning about having some flexibility in allowing different grade levels to come to parent drop-off at different times. So we'll be very flexible until we get a good routine here. We do not want masses of children dropping off at the same time.
Are we going to do temperature checks before they get on the bus?
So we are not planning on doing temperature checks as they get on the bus. What we, I think, are going to do is, as we move closer to start of school, is really educate parents in terms of doing a self-check at home and asking parents to really go through the list of symptoms that are COVID-related. And if students are displaying any of those symptoms, please do not send them to school. So part of our move going forward will be educate parents on what are those symptoms, what should you be looking for. We want them to stay home and not get on the bus. In terms of taking temperatures either at school as students are arriving in mass or on a bus, we have a lot of concerns about being able to operationally implement any of that. On a bus, if you are taking a stop, we don't typically pick up one student at a time. It is 5-10 students getting on a bus. And so if you have a driver trying to take temperatures, you're holding traffic up, we see that as a recipe for an accident or something waiting to happen. So we're going to try and encourage parents to make sure that they're running over that list of symptoms every day and making sure they're screening their kids before they get on a bus or they drop them off at a school site. I think that's our best mode of trying to make sure that the kids are being caught before they get with other students, with employees on a daily basis.
There are some schools, I know Booker High School has more than one opening, so I know that Dr. Shelley can do tests before they come into school. So will that be allowed?
Well, I think
do the individual principals have the autonomy to do that if they so choose?
So I think for certain things, we're going to want to make sure there's a district standard, and I think that temperatures would be one of them. So I think we either as a district want to say we are taking temperatures across the district or we are not. And so I think that's just one of the decisions we're going to have to make. I think we get ourselves into trouble. It's like masks. If we say one school is going to require masks for everybody on campus and another school is not, I think that inconsistency will get us in trouble as a district. So I think for some of those big items, we're going to have to say, yes, we're taking temperatures, or no, we're not. And if we are going to take temperatures, there's a lot of considerations to be able to move people through those checkpoints as quickly as possible.
So if Dr. Shelley wants to take temperatures at 5 of her openings, she's not allowed to?
Can I just add to this?
That's a hard thing to say.
So here's what I want to just add. So we went back and forth with temperature taking, and we realized that anyone can take fever-reducing medication before they get to school, before they get on the bus. Parents can administer that. And so, a temperature check may not show you what you are hoping that it would show you, any more than a child with a fever is probably not behaving well. So teachers would immediately send that child to the clinic. The other thing I want to say very strongly is our administrators want to be all in, and they don't want to have one school giving the impression that they are being more safe than any other. So we want to be sure that on some of these things, the administrators very much want consistency. So if it's good for one school, then we need to make sure that it's good for all schools to do.
I'm sorry, I just don't agree with that. if a school has the ability and wants to do something, I don't see why they cannot.
There are many things that they will have flexibility in doing. We are working very closely with administrators tomorrow, and we of course have been, and we'll have special meetings throughout the next 3 weeks to try to support our administrators, but the general consensus is we want to be in this together.
There's in it together, and there's, I don't agree with you. Bridget?
Thank you. So I would agree that there's a lot in the plan that I think gets down to the granular level, and so one, philosophically, I think I want to ensure, and I think this is the case, to have our administrators at the school-based level to have as much autonomy, and I think because there's such a necessity for flexibility that we're going to have, that at this level, I mean, we would be holding we probably would never get anything finalized or make a decision, but I think it would have less ability to be nimble, and that is what I believe we are potentially going to face some volatility, and the less confines we can put in place, the better. But I use the word guardrails because you use that. I think temperature checks, how we utilize, like what verbiage and how the masking standpoint are I think it makes the appropriate sense that that's something that we would give direction on. One thing that I had reached out to a couple of people in the medical profession, and I know Michael Drennan's on here, as far as temperature checks, because it seems like a great mitigation tool, and certainly if you just start with buses, this is a perfect example of one question answering one creates a number of other, and I'm thinking more of a risk factor of not only liability of if we start with buses, you have to stop at a traffic standpoint, so we are increasing the risk from an accident standpoint, which could actually have a higher probability of injuring someone. Then on top of that is the part of if they do have a temperature, what directionally do we do? You have to, I want to be fair to our bus drivers, and their job is challenging as it is, so I just, is the risk and reward, and this is the really unfortunate part I think about a lot of decisions we're going to have to make today, is, you know, what's the cost benefit at the end of the day? I think if we were going to do it at school sites, my concern is from a safety standpoint, we're going to have a massive bottleneck, very similar to stuff that we talked about when we were thinking about metal detectors. And so is that increasing more of a safety hazard than it's providing? And so if Michael, I know from a temperature checking standpoint, it can give insight. And I spoke with some other people who are in the medical field, not my area of expertise, but because there is that concern, yes, you can take Tylenol and it wouldn't indicate. I mean, I know it's a benefit, it can help give some guidance, but I don't know if you could share any input on that, because I think it's a...
Sure. So I think all the things, and thank you very much for including me again today. I'm happy to be here. Sigler, I think all the things you covered are one of what's problematic about, or difficult about the temperature checks, right? So you implement bottlenecks. When you have bottlenecks, you have more students gathered together, and the ability for transmission. Can you take fever-reducing medications to hide that? Yes. Not everyone has a fever. So that's, I don't want to, the thought would be not to implement a false sense of security and, oh, they don't have a fever, so they're safe. Yes, in an ideal world, and if it's executable, then temperature provides us, is one tool that we can use to provide us with information to identify certain students that are sick and exclude them. But to your point, and I you know, it's a difficult decision to make, but does it provide us information we want at that period of time worth, to your point, the risk or all the other things that kind of go along with it, right? So if you're doing it in a school, what's the length of time it takes to get temperatures on all the students to get them into the classroom? And how does that change your school day? And what does that look like, in addition to the bottlenecking and more students being around each other? Yes, it provides an excellent piece of information, but to that point, it's not the end-all, be-all piece of information either. There's a lot that needs to go into educating parents and educating the public, especially now, on recognizing the other symptoms that go along with this and keeping our children home. But you know, it is a very difficult decision. There's a lot of different pieces to think about. It's a good tool, but it's not the only tool.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for being here today. Again, I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I just saw that later in the plan, there is some talk about buying some thermal or thermometers. Yeah, I would like to finish with our plan because we've got a short time and a lot of stuff to go over.
So if we could throw the PowerPoint back up, great. Next slide.
It's buses.
That's transportation.
Okay, so transportation, one of the things we've always been concerned about as we look to open schools is certainly transportation, and we have no silver bullet to lend you today that would say this is how we fix this. At the end of the day, we are going to be encouraging all parents as much as possible, as you've heard, to try and drive their students to and from school. We have no way to socially distance on buses and be able to effectively and efficiently get students to campus. So at this point, we will be routing as we normally do, and what we would request is that you require all students who ride the bus to come prepared to ride the bus with a mask to protect everyone on the bus. Our drivers will have hand sanitizer, will have masks to protect them, face shields if they would like them. But at this point, we will be routing buses as we normally do in any school year, and hopefully using the PPE to protect students on the bus.
Eric.
I have some questions about the bus. I got a phone call today from a teacher's bus's aide, and I have two issues. So this is my first one, then I'm gonna have a follow-up question. And she was saying that she is a bus's aide on a special needs bus. So she has to help up kids in a wheelchair. She's in their face trying to help the kids up, and she's 67 years old. I'm not gonna give the person's name. I'm gonna tell you she's 67. And she's concerned. And I told her, I said, we'll provide you PPE, we'll provide you masks, we'll provide you gloves. And what she said to me was, that's not enough to save me. How should I respond to her?
Well, I wish I had a good answer for her. I think that one of the things that if somebody's in that situation where no matter what level of PPE we're providing in a job where they can't, obviously a school bus aide cannot work from home, they have to be on that bus to be able to provide that service for us. The other thing that they'll be able to do is take a personal leave. And so one of the things we're going to do after the decision's made on the plan today is open a personal leave. So that person could take a personal leave to see how things develop, see what happens during the year, and then come back to work. But at the end of the day, I don't know that there's a good solution for somebody in that situation.
You understand that people who are bus's aid, by and large, on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale.
Sure.
My next question has to do with, I've heard some teachers talk about losing courtesy bus.
So I did see that.
Is that true? Is that accurate?
So when we talk about courtesy busing, one of the things that we're going to try and so when we go, let's talk about busing transportation. So we're going to go back to the core of services we normally provide because again, we're trying to socially distance as much as we can on buses. One of the things we always do after the start of school is if buses have capacity, we typically provide courtesy busing to families that live under 2 miles to the school. And so as long as a bus has got capacity, we'll stop under that 2 mile limit and pick kids up and bring them to school. That's the courtesy busing we're not going to reopen until we see really what's going on with our busing program. However, for employees where we're providing those extra runs from a school to another school, we fully anticipate being able to provide those. So courtesy transportation in terms of under 2 miles is really what we were considering starting school off. We will not open that this year.
But you are going to have the courtesy busing for a teacher from go to school. She brings her kids to her school,
as much as
a non-districted school.
We are going to plan that as much as we possibly can. Let me just say with the caveat is if we get really, really short with bus drivers, our focus is going to be from the home to the school and back the other way. And so some of those runs may run really late. So we're going to try our best to do that for them, but our focus will be from the home to the school.
Well, thank you. But I just want to say this, that I'm thankful that you're going to be doing this because as long as I've been on the board, we always talk about words, we throw out words like culture and respect and concern. Now is the time to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Now is the time to show our employees how we feel about them. Now is the time to show them, do you feel that they're just widgets in a factory? Are they human beings who are professionals and deserve our respect? And how we treat them now over the next couple of months is going to affect the culture in our district for decades to come. They're going to remember how they were treated during the situation. So thank you.
Jane?
Well, I would just like to add that about 90 of our bus drivers are 65 and older. And how many of those are not going to come back in order to hopefully save their life, as they seem to fear, along with our substitutes who are in many cases older and retired. So those are some of my concerns, is will these people come back? I don't have a driver's license, but I guess I could learn to drive a bus. I'm not sure, but I'm in that age category too. So here you go. It's a crapshoot. But I think that I have some real concerns when it comes to our staff and taking good care of them. And I am worried about our older staff members, both teachers and classified workers.
Jane, you're 29. You're not in the high-risk category.
Shirley?
That's right. Thank you.
I know that all of our administration is keeping our employees at the heart of these decisions. Some of these are difficult decisions, and I know you have been anxious about this whole thing. But you said that this aide on this bus could take a leave, but can't we have enhanced face protections? I mean, like, can't we get the 95s for these teachers that are going to be with these? I mean, and can't we get face masks and shields for the bus drivers?
Absolutely.
Aren't we going to have enhanced protection for some of these? I mean, so that's one thing I want to let our employees know. Don't rush to the conclusion that you're at the far end of this and we're at the other. Look to see what kind of solutions we have for you, because what we do for this person isn't what we're going to, because we are going to try. I mean, my understanding from talking to you is that we are going to give the protection that we feel each one needs in their situation. And we're going to try to accommodate the remote learning for those who can't come back. I mean, but we don't know yet all those numbers. But that enhanced protection, I mean, I don't think they should just think you have to take a layoff. I mean, because there's benefits, there's health care, there's a lot of other things that go into these decisions, let alone their salary. It's not that easy. I mean, so we have to make sure that we provide what we have. Enhanced safety for these people.
Absolutely, and if there's something, so as Jason Harris works with his team and they start to talk to bus drivers and bus aides and bring them back to work, and they're talking about the scenarios they're going to be involved in, and they know what it looks like, if there's something we haven't thought of and it comes to us and it's something we can possibly provide for them, absolutely we want to do that. So 100%, that's exactly where we want to be with our employees. But at some point, if no level of PPE or whatever we can do on a bus is going to make that person comfortable, I don't know that we have another solution. But so that was my point. But absolutely, in terms of getting feedback from them, in terms of what we are providing, what we could additionally provide, we're listening, and we're trying to make that environment as safe as possible for our employees and for the students that do have to ride that bus.
Bridget?
Thank you. No, I concur. I think I truly believe everyone is trying to figure out a way to certainly keep everyone safe. But if you look at our staff and the impact they have, and at every role, I believe that does that mean that we have answers to every difficult question? No, but I genuinely believe that. And even going back to our conversation before, is whatever it takes from an even investment standpoint, like you said, what we need to do at least to offer it and try to mitigate their exposure. But I don't diminish the challenging decisions that individual people have to make based on what their circumstances, and so I don't want that to be lost. I agree that the bus that face covering should be mandated. I have a question just as it pertains to the driver. Is there any risk with them wearing a mask while driving? Is there anything that we need to consider that? I would hope not. But
no, I don't think so. As long as the mask or the face shield is fitted correctly and it's not obstructing their field of vision, then I think that we would be fine.
Okay.
The N95 mask you can't wear for long periods of time. So if they're wearing an N95 mask while they have the students on the bus, they might need to take that off. The N95 mask could could build it up, is from what I've been reading on it.
Yeah, and I think that certainly some people can wear an N95 a little better than others just because of the way the N95 kind of restricts the airflow. So again, I think in those cases, we'd leave it up to the employee. What type of mask do you want? What's going to work for you? And again, I think we're going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to work with everybody as best we can and try and meet their needs as with the PPE that's available on the market that we can provide for them. So.
And with that, thank you. I have just a follow-up question, if Michael Drennan. It's my understanding face shields are more protecting. I mean, obviously, the more you have available, whether it be a mask and a face shield, there's more mitigation, but masks protect others and face shields protect yourself. Is that a fair, an unscientific way to explain that?
No, that's pretty accurate. It depends on the type of mask. So the N95 mask that was discussed and a surgical mask, typical, like the one Jody's currently wearing, those provide protection to the wearer because of the filter design that they have. And the N95 is obviously the higher level of that and the better of the two. The face mask, the cloth face mask, the cloth face masks are intended to reduce your ability to spread the disease, like with your coughing or sneezing. It also provides some protection to the wearer, but that's not its primary focus. So anytime, and then to the face shield standpoint, anytime you can put another barrier between you and that person, you're providing an extra level of protection. The goal of the face shield is to prevent splatters or droplets of getting on your face. So that's a physical barrier that's between you and that other person, and that's its intent. That's its intent. So if you're wearing a mask and a shield, obviously a better situation there. And then depending on the type of mask they're wearing depends on the type of protection that person will have or the protection prevention of spread they will offer to others around them.
Okay, thank you so much. And final, just on transportation. Last time we met, I believe it was said approximately 50% of our families utilize transportation. Is that?
Yeah, it's usually a little under, but 50% is a close guess.
And then in the survey, I think it was 85% said they would drive to school. But is that of the 50%?
No, of the surveyed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a sense of capacity.
A third and a third. It was 2/3 and a third basically.
I wasn't sure if it was of those who currently take advantage of transportation or if it's just the overall population. So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So food service. We met with SBA this morning, and one of the discussions we had was regarding food service and what we're doing in cafeterias. Sarah Dan, the Director of Food Nutrition Services, is working on options, ready to serve options so that students can come into the cafeteria, pick up a box of food and eat somewhere. And so I think operationally she's prepared to do a lot of that. Really the key is going to be working with each school individually and trying to figure out how we, as much as we possibly can, socially distance in the cafeteria. As you know, our lunch programs are already lengthy, with many schools running 3 lunch programs starting very early. So what does that look like? What are the alternative areas that students can eat once they get their lunch? So I think those are going to be things that we have to work through on every individual campus as we move closer to the start of school.
My question is, and it was one of the questions that came into me, is that why can't we use the cafeteria for a teaching? If the classes are too big, why can't we use the cafeteria, the media, theater, whatever's available in order to break your classes smaller?
We certainly could, and I think that's one of the things we've looked at is every space is what are the alternative spaces that you could have kids on campus. But at the end of the day, we've got to bring students probably into the cafeteria to at least be able to serve them the lunch.
Well, the other question was bringing the lunches into the classrooms. Has there been any discussion about that?
There has been discussion about that. I think one of the things we're going to have to work through is supervision over that lunch period in the classroom, because typically that's I don't know that when the teacher's on their lunch, if we have enough aides at sites, and Dr. Kingsley can talk to that, but do we have enough aides to cover those lunch periods so teachers still have a duty-free lunch? That's one of the things that we technically would have to work through if we had lunches in a classroom.
The other one is, how many substitutes do we have?
So that's another great question.
Has that been surveyed?
So we did send out a survey. We didn't get a great response. Not this coming week. The week after is when subs come to pick up all of their badges, so they can start subbing at the beginning of the year. So not next week. The week after, HR will have a good handle on how many have picked up their badges, and we'll know from there. I think what we can anticipate in all sections across the district, whether it be subs in classrooms, whether it be teachers, bus drivers, food workers, we're going to see higher absenteeism rates in all of those areas, and we're going to have to deal with what that looks like on day one. So I don't have a number for you yet. We will in the next couple of weeks. We'll keep communicating with them. Certainly key, I think, for subs is what are we doing to protect them, just like a teacher. We want to make sure we're communicating that, and we'll see how things come together as we start. Certainly, I think a lot of them are waiting for what does our plan look like, which hopefully at the end of the day today we have.
I know, because they've told me that. Some of them have said they're coming back, and they don't know if they're coming back because they don't know what our plan is. So the numbers that you have are probably not accurate because people didn't know.
I would agree with you.
Shirley. Sorry, I looked down there, the lights on.
Back when I was in high school, about 20 years ago or so, we had crowded classrooms, and one of the ways they took care of it is they had early starts and late starts. We didn't have lunch at school. I mean, is there any thought to that, especially like in high school? I think Pineview has a 0 hour. I mean, what about, and then especially with their students that can drive to school? I mean, you're nodding. Are we looking at staggered hours?
So not really, right, Mr. Canties? We realize that at high school we need to have 135 hours in front of the children to get credit for that class, that course. And so high school principals may dig into that a little bit more with a staggered schedule. We're certainly talking about it with drop-off and pick-up at younger ages. But at this time, in order to manage the schedules that are so wildly different for all of our kids in 6 through 12, that's kind of a scheduling nightmare for our schedulers. But probably a lot of things are on the table for them. Mr. Cantis has the schedulers getting together and working through many of these issues in the next 2 weeks. Right?
Thank you.
Eric?
I do got to say that food service would probably be one of the easiest places for this issue because they've always taken safety and cross-contamination as a huge issue because they're cooking food, and so they're already doing a lot of the things that we're talking about for district-wide. So I don't think that that's going to be a big issue. But the tree falling in the woods. I don't want us to do precautions and it simply be a tree falling in the woods. When subs are looking at it, when buses, aides, teachers are looking at what is going on, we can do all the stuff we're doing, but if we're not communicating to staff who isn't here, if we're not providing training, if we're not, making sure that we're not only actually doing things, but actually creating the perception to the general public and to our staff and our teachers that we're actually doing these, it's meaningless. You can scrub the floor clean, but if nobody knows you did it, the value is diminished. People need to know what it is that you're doing. People need to be able to not only be safe, but to feel safe. And those are the things that are going to drive people coming back. It's going to affect absenteeism. People's perception of what we do is going to affect the actual reality of of what happens on boots on the ground. So I implore you, communicate, and think about that. And sometimes, you know me, I'm the budget guy, and sometimes you're going to say things, risk reward, it doesn't equate. But in this rather unique circumstance, sometimes you got to think about how it does for people's perception, and how does it make people feel? Does it make people feel safer? So it's not just making things actually feel safe, but it's communicating what's safe and being cognizant of people's fears. And doing everything you can to relieve those fears. Because even if we have somebody come in and do O2 every day at our schools and we scrub them clean, people are still going to have a fear of going back in. So we have to address that issue so that you could be scrubbing the school clean every day and people could still have a fear and not want to come back and affect our absenteeism. So we got to be cognizant of sometimes the risk reward doesn't always match up, and we need to understand what is the concern of our staff and address those concerns that they have. Even if you think, Jody, well, that's really not going to have that much of an impact, but if they have that concern, that concern is going to drive behavior, and sometimes that behavior is going to have a negative impact on the operation of our school district. So I'm all for making sure we use our money wisely, but in this situation, sometimes perception is the reality. So I know I understand some of your comments earlier, but I just wanted to reinforce that issue.
One of the things that, as a matter of fact, the majority of what I'm hearing from teachers is the fact that they don't know if they'll have sick time they can use, if they're going to be personal time, whether they're going to get paid, how FRS is going to be affected. Those are the questions that are really driving my emails that I'm getting from teachers. So if we can put out something that tells teachers what to anticipate if they have to take off time, what happens if they get COVID? What does the whole class then, and how long does the whole class have to stay out? Those are simple things that we've talked about, but we haven't conveyed that to our teachers, and they're scared because they don't have the answers to that. So we've got to put that out there to them before we ask them if they're going to come back or not. And I'm not sure whether they're going to get paid. I'm really not, based on some of my conversations that I've heard.
Sure.
I think they have to use their own sick time. But what happens after their sick time runs out?
Well, I think we can talk through some of those options. On the next couple of slides, we'll talk a little bit about the process we got in place for identifying COVID issue at a school and what we do from there.
Okay, because that's the main one I've been getting in from teachers. And I promised that I would convey that. So I have them with me, the notes.
Sure, absolutely. So Dr. Kingsley, this is the instructional one.
Hey, so now I just want to clarify something. So as a teacher, when I was a teacher, all I did was wring my hands. How do I keep my kids safe?
Sure.
In addition to how do I teach them? Sorry, I'm going to get emotional. As a principal, oh my God, I'm playing Mitzi. As a principal and now at the district, it's even worse. The weight is so heavy on principals and us and you. How do we keep not only our kids, but our teachers and our staff and our bus aides and our cafeteria workers safe? So I just want to be clear. This plan that we completed was a dictate from the commissioner in response to the emergency order. We put everything we could in here to make sure that this would get approved. I need you to understand, this is not a personal opinion. This plan is we did our jobs. Can we get this approved from the commissioner? And I guarantee you, well, I guess I can't completely guarantee, but we did so much research in this that I believe this will be approved. That does not mean anything personal from me or the staff or us about this plan. So I need you to be really clear about that with where we are. Okay? Sorry to get emotional, but that is not, our principals are wringing their hands. Our teachers are wringing their hands. How are we going to keep our kids safe? How are we going to keep each other safe? Okay, so now what we did in the plan was, when you think about what has to go to the state, it's you must open traditional 5 days a week. And then there are some other assurances that we have to fill out for the state, 7 of them. Most of them are on ensuring that we have continuity of instruction. How do you have continuity of instruction if you're doing an innovative plan giving parents an option to go remote? That has to be that we allow our kids to have the same teacher in as often as possible, in any way that we can make that happen. The kids have a teacher that, whether they're face-to-face or remote, they can be in front of that teacher. That's going to be additional work on our teachers. We are very much hopeful that some of the teachers will be what I call 22nd century teachers, because that's probably the way the future is going to go. That teachers can be doing live instruction and face-to-face instruction with children via computers and Zoom, etc. That instruction we're calling concurrent instruction. So that will be an option that we really try to put into place if we have parents who say, my child is coming back remote. The other option that we have is that we might have, especially at elementary levels, we may have a full class of elementary students that a principal might be able to say to a staff member at their school, I have a full class of 5th graders. And so teachers, if you're certified in that area, then put your name in if you have a reason to want to teach remotely. And we're talking about requesting doctor's notes. We talked with Barry and Pat yesterday, requesting doctor's notes from those teachers, and then choosing by seniority. So full class of remote is likely not going to happen very often at middle or high school because of the courses. However, a teacher may have 3 periods of face-to-face children and 2 periods fully remote. That's going to require our administrators to go through tremendous thinking about this and getting their schedulers on board for looking at those remote students and getting them scheduled. The other option that we may have to fall back on at the high school, if opening in this way, is we may have a remote teacher who is teaching a one-off course, like a physics BC, and so at one school you have a few kids who want that course remote, but at other schools you may have a few more to make up a class. So the remote options, we're calling it from the state innovative, that's what they've asked it to be called, Florida's optional innovative reopening plan, and that is our remote option plan. So sorry to get emotional.
I'd just like to jump in really quick. So at the last, when we met on the 2nd, there was a gentleman who was asking us about putting a camera in the classroom, and we had said, oh, it doesn't work. And I had completely forgotten, Jamal's back there, but when we did the Citizens Advisory Committees for the superintendent search, he had actually acquired a 180-degree motion camera. So we now know we have the ability, and Joe has done some research with CDW about the ability, so this is another one of those capital decisions, where we can install the camera in the classroom, and it will follow the teacher through motion or voice, and we can get them lavaliers or one of those telephone speakers. So they can have kids who can Zoom in. So this is that concurrent live interactive instruction that we were discussing. So it may be that the teacher has 20 kids in the class and 3 kids Zooming in remotely. And that's the issue where the teachers are really going to have to be innovative in their practice, because teaching all your kids online or teaching all your kids in person is difficult at best at any given point in time, but having to do it both simultaneously becomes a much more difficult task. So there is a lot of PD that will be required. But I just wanted to kind of jump in on that particular piece, because we had kind of said previously we couldn't, because you didn't want a teacher walking around with their laptop in their hand all day. But now we do have that capability. So that is another kind of area we'd have to have further conversation in terms of procurement yesterday on.
I'm glad to hear that we do have those. I think we had a discussion about that, because when I was talking to Mr. Licata from Palm Beach, he was saying that they're going to be using something like that when they get started, because they're using it for teacher training now. And but I want to be sure that we let parents and teachers know that when we have the remote learning now, it's going to be the full day, and it's going to look a lot like a school day. Like, it's going to start at the time school starts, and it's going to run. Now, then we hear, well, I don't want my kid sitting in front of a computer for 5 hours. Well, they'll have a lunch break, I suppose. But that's pretty much what it's going to be like. I mean, we're going to be asking teachers to come into the school to be teaching from school remotely. Is that accurate? Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a school day. I mean, and parents need to be home, or somebody needs to be home with that child, especially if it's a young child. I mean, you can't pick up and run off to Costco to pick something up at 10 in the morning anymore. You're going to be home with that child, making sure that they're on the computer and that they stay there. Right. I mean, right?
Yes.
Yes, and if I can just add, so tomorrow, or hopefully tomorrow after you all tell us which direction to go and if we should submit this to the state, we need your blessing, and then we will go full force on communicating with our parents and our staff. The communication with the parents will look like this. We've already surveyed them once, and we had a tremendous response. And they answered the question, will I be teaching, or will I have my child remote or face-to-face? But the question now becomes, here, please review what it looks like to be remote, so you understand it's not anything like our emergency I Can plan, but it is live face-to-face instruction on a computer screen to go remote. So we're telling them, if you have not changed your mind on the survey that you filled out, do not go back, and you don't need to do anything. If you have changed your mind, Denise's team has found a way that we will take their last entry on their child's N number and accept that in our planning purposes. Or if you haven't filled out the survey, we really need you to fill out the survey with your child's N number for every child you have, so that we can give that. We've started giving it to our administrators, anything that's done, but it will be corrected and updated if they change their mind. They need that in order to plan classes. They need it in order to staff their students into their schedules. So tomorrow it'll be full force on communicating with our teachers and our staff on what are we doing to keep them safe, and what are we doing, what have you decided that we're doing, and what are we doing with these options for teaching? We have a principal meeting first thing in the morning, and I know our administrators are very anxious to communicate with their families and staff.
Thank you.
So did I hear you right, that you just said that if a teacher is teaching remotely because they're high risk, you said that they would bring a doctor's note and they're a reduced immune system, that they would have to come into the school to teach? Is that what you said, Dr. Kingsley?
Yes, that's what we had conversations about yesterday.
Why? Why would, it seems to me that if we trust our teachers, a lot of the ills of education is because of trust with teachers. We do the FSAs because people don't trust teachers. So why would you require somebody who has, we know by definition, has a reduced immunity, doesn't want to come into school because they don't want to choose life versus death? They're teaching remotely, which they could be in Acapulco and teach. Why in God's green earth would you make them come into the school that we've all agreed they don't need to come into because they have reduced immunity? It seems counterintuitive. So I have a couple questions, but my first question is, why?
Yeah, and that's something that could be continued to be discussed, but it was kind of unanimous yesterday in our discussions.
Yeah, I didn't ask you how many people voted for it. I asked you why.
So I think that we had a great conversation yesterday with Pat and Barry, SCTA, about the entire process. So when students we get the information from parents in terms of students and how many are going to be remote versus how many are going to be coming back to school, and when principals take a look at what that mix looks like and they can identify a full class of students that would justify a teacher being remote, then the process at this point that we've kind of vetted out will be that they'll look for volunteers who would like to be a remote teacher. Again, remote meaning at this point, and again, we can still have those conversations, but at this point it means you don't have anybody in your class, but you do come to school, so you're utilizing our technology and you've got all your resources there right in front of you. And so that was
active panel.
And the active panel. So you're, again, with continuity of education, we're trying to make sure that the experience for a student who is full-time remote is the same as Jody Dumas sitting in the class next to them. So again, I think that was the thinking. And then we'd go through a process of saying, okay, I've got the need for, I don't know, maybe it's 2 classes of remote learning at whatever site. I've got 5 teachers who are interested in being that remote teacher, again, being alone in their classroom with their students online. They would submit a doctor's note that says that they have some underlying medical condition that makes them more susceptible to exposure to COVID-19. That would be the second qualification. And then based on those 2, I'd like to do it. I've got an underlying health condition that the doctor's verified. Then we'd use seniority to try and be fair with that group of people to select the 2 people who would be, again, providing that remote instruction.
So I just want to make sure you're saying, I'm going to get to the second part first. You're saying the why is because you think having a computer at their home with the internet doesn't have the same level of services as having the computer at the school district because they have an active board?
Well, I think that maybe Dr. King's going to talk better than that.
I'm still asking why.
Well, I think that it's the entire piece of having all the resources available to you at the school versus being at your home. So I think that was the thinking.
If a teacher can do it from home, if the teachers can do it from home, it's a lecture class. If they can do it from home, could they be able to do it from home?
Well, again, let me refer to Dr. Kingsley. I don't know that we have a lot of lecture classes. I think we have a lot of interactive classes, and I think that's better provided with some of the infrastructure we have at the site. But Dr. Kingsley, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
You know, the active panel is quite a tool, but the discussion surrounding the whole, whether they're in classroom, in school, was one that the feeling was that is a fair way to do this also, where teachers could still, I'm just telling you, where teachers could still.
I didn't say anything, but you know what I'm thinking.
Yes, I do.
We're not talking about fairness, we're talking about people's lives.
Well, and we would very much work hard to make sure that they are just in their space by themselves in their classroom with only their computer and their resources and their panel.
And there may be an aide that is in the classroom with them also to help them support a student who may have an aide with them in the classroom. Being in the school also allows them to collaborate with their peers, make sure that they're having a continuity of instruction across, say, all of the second grade team. So that was another reason.
These people don't want to collaborate with their peers. They don't want to have interaction. They want to stay at home and be in quarantine. That's the whole reason why they want to do this. And going to the subject of going past this, I don't agree with the why, but I'm kind of getting what you're saying is, so if somebody comes with a doctor's note, they're all they're all equal. Somebody's going through chemo and has multiple issues, they're at the same level as somebody who their risk level may be less. And so we're not going to do degrees of risk. It's if you have an issue, then it's based upon seniority. So if you're young and you're going through chemo and you have a compromised immune, you're at the same level as somebody who maybe doesn't have it as, okay, so, all right, but what are you going to do when you don't have enough teachers to come into a school and our population of subs are retired teachers? Well, I come from Escambia County. A lot of our subs are military spouses who have to travel every 3 years, and so they're not really looking for a full-time job, and so they work as subs. And so it's a younger population at the subs. Here, it's not like that. We have a lot of retired teachers. What are we going to do? Are we going to close down the entire school if we can't get teachers and get people remote? And you're telling them, I know you're going through chemo, and I know you want to stay at home, and I know you got this doctor's notes, but guess what? We want you to come to school so you can interact with your peers and your teacher's aide, even though we want you to work remotely. I think you're going to have teachers not wanting to do that. That's not a question. It's more of a statement, unless you disagree with me, Dr. Kingsley.
I don't disagree with you. I don't think we're going to need a very large number of remote teachers only, given the concurrent teaching that's going to be available.
I think with the cases going up the way there are, I think you're going to have a lot of people who are going to opt for remote teaching.
I know, and I don't know that we'll have the demand, is my point. We just have to see how the remote demand comes in from our parents.
I would ask that you be concrete in your questions, please, because we want to get as many questions answered without having too much of a dialogue, because it's now 10 after 1. Okay? So next is Jane.
Well, I have a bit of a statement, just very short, but, this pandemic is not going away. And I'm not sure we're going back to school, because I'm not sure today I would not make the decision to go back to school on August 10th. We had in Sarasota County 115 cases. We had across Florida today 9,194, 132 deaths. That's a lot. And we had a 19.3% positive rate across the state and a 15% positive rate in Sarasota. Sarasota is one of the 15 hot spots in the country on the last status that I got yesterday, one of the 15 hot spots. We ranked 13th, thank God, but 6 other areas, not Miami being the only one. The first ranked was number 2 in Jacksonville. So that's an interesting one, but those are the concerns I have. So we did a distance learning, we did the CARES, the I Can plan. So what did we learn from that? So that if we're shut down now, what are we going to do? Are we going to do the kind of things that we're talking about with distance learning, with a caveat of teachers actually streaming classes remotely from home, I would think? I mean, we had in Arizona 3 teachers teaching over the internet, and one of them died Sunday, and all 3 of them had COVID. So it's, and those are the things that our teachers are hearing. Those are the things that our parents are hearing. And I don't have the answer for it, but are we looking at not only the plan that will get us the approval by the end of July with the wonderful DOE, and I talked to the chancellor last Friday, and he said those plans should be turned around in 2 to 3 days, which would be a nice thing. But do we have, as our plan, are we also working on a shutdown plan that may happen this fall, because of the situation?
Yes. So this week, actually, we have our specialists working with several teachers that are creating exemplar lessons that go on our learning management system, Blackboard. We have an expectation next year that all teachers will have a presence, an online presence on Blackboard, where one of the things we heard from our parents in the I Can plan is they had too many places to go. And so our teachers will be posting announcements, assignments, and their lesson plans on Blackboard. And And our specialists and these incredibly generous teachers who are working to create these exemplars will be sharing those with teachers. I will tell you, I cannot emphasize enough how important it's going to be for our teachers to collaborate and so teams collaborating on those lessons as we move forward are going to allow teachers to, lighten their load in planning the same content, and using the exemplars will help that, and they will then have that up. You may not realize, but we have an incredible instructional focus guide that's online for our teachers with just extraordinary activities and resources that our teachers can use to plop right into their lesson plans. We have a math program that it's wizardry, what they have done to create these activities that teachers can download and put into their lesson plan that are all standards-based. We don't have the option of reviewing material in fourth quarter like we did with the I Can plan. We have to be prepared to teach children online new content, and that is going to be our full focus of pre-planning week. Administrators realize we are going to be working, as much of the time as we have available to us on lesson plans that are ready to be spontaneously used in the event of a shutdown.
Bridget?
Thank you. I share a lot of concerns that Mrs. Goodwin just brought up. So my question is, we have to make a lot of decisions so we can communicate. I agree with Mr. Robinson as well, and I think there is so much work being done, but when the unknown is what is causing so much more anxiety on top of an already incredibly anxious time. My thought, I know trust me, I know how challenging this will be for families who work. I'm one of them, but instead of going back on the 10th, that we push out our instructional time to a later time in August, so we would be in compliance, because my concern is, one, from the actual health standpoint, we are rising very fast. And I know people will say something, there's all sorts of people, and I'm not going to even necessarily get into the aspect of whether children are super spreaders or whether they're not. The reality is just the mere statistics and the probability based on our, if you would call our census, and based on our employees and also the amount of students we serve, the ratio is significantly different. We have substantially more students than we do staff. So there's just a high probability that we are going to be seeing open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, and I think that is bad I think we have to look at a lot of different risks, and this is, I recognize, I do not want us to be held hostage from this illness forever, so I am not in support of that by any means. I think but when you lay out some of these issues, even the planning part from an instructional standpoint, having that ability and giving our staff some, because we start with the key elements of when we open, this is what we would require, masks and all the other things that we just talked about. But then all of this time, right immediately afterwards, the administrators and their teachers and the staffing and the planning and the communication for any of our staff to make the right choice for them, because I cannot tell them what that is. But I do agree that whatever we can do to try absolutely ensure their safety, but at the same time, that part is missing, and it's just, I don't know, I do not believe we have enough time to effectively execute that in a safe manner, in a confident manner, in a way that people feel comfortable coming back. It pains me to think that we would have to prolong it, but we're actually one of the earlier districts in the state that start. If you look around the state, I know, and again, to Michael Drennan, my question is, if from a scientific standpoint, when we think about trying to bump the curve and see slow the spread. I mean, I don't know how much time that test technically buys us, and I'm meaning how much time it buys us, meaning that if everyone starts to take individual responsibilities and we really, really take this seriously to try to protect our community, so it goes the other way, but we're all working concurrently. This, I believe, allows some information and planning time that's absolutely essential, the parts that Dr. Kingsley just brought up, but I guess my question to Michael is, how many weeks away is the 29th? I don't know. So, I mean, what's the likelihood of seeing those spikes go down from a time frame of at least what we learned in the past 4 months? I really give you big loaded questions. I'm sorry.
A really good question. It's really hard to make those type of estimates, this far out. Looking at the number of cases that we have now that are reported daily, and knowing that an incubation period of 14 days exists, then I would say realistically in the next 2 weeks you're not going to see numbers decrease. I don't know. I'm not saying they'll go up, but I don't. There's no reason to believe that we're going to start to all of a sudden see a decrease in the number of cases. So there's that piece. I just don't think there's enough time to make that decision now. Based on the trends currently that we've been seeing, I would expect us to hold steady where we are. Obviously, there's a lot we still don't know about this virus, so things can change. We don't know how many people have had it in the community or whether or not they can get it again. So from that standpoint, it's hard to make I'm not going to make a guess on what we think, what will happen over the next 2 weeks. But based on the trends we've seen, at this time, there's no reason to believe we're going to see all of a sudden a decrease in the number of cases.
Thank you. And with that is where I kind of transition over to, I'm in agreement with 70% of the people who, I want my child back in brick and mortar. I know teachers want to be in front of their children and teach them. But then independently, we all have to weigh those risks. As a board and an educational institution, we have to be prepared for both. And I just don't feel that starting on the 10th, is giving us enough instructional time to prepare and the confidence and the communication, because like I said, I am not for us staying locked in for the foreseeable future. I think that we have to work through creatively of how to get through this, but I believe there's a combination of communication, planning, preparedness, and honestly, not to be an insurance or risk management nerd, but preparation and preparedness is the best way to mitigate anything. And when we're rushing it, it will cause more fear and more concerns, and I just worry that we won't have people from a staffing standpoint feel comfortable enough to get back, or if we run into even the flu season that was discussed last time, where we're shutting down again, from the instructional standpoint, I believe that that's the better way to at least give it more time from a planning standpoint and to prepare families so they understand what that potentially may look like. So that's probably, I don't know if anyone knew, it's not an easy decision, but I think that we should seriously consider a push back on instructional time, and then in the meantime try to utilize that time from planning and communicating so that each from a staffing standpoint and so families can make the best decision, hopefully while the spike starts to decrease.
Shirley.
I don't know whether it's going to make much difference going in back to school in 3 weeks from Monday or 4 weeks. I think we do know that probably the deaths will rise. When the numbers rise, 2 weeks later, the other ones will rise. But one thing I was thinking about was, yes, we might have a problem getting substitutes in. Is there any way that we could access some of these? Because I know when we did FEMA, we did get some reimbursement for the staff that was working. I mean, what about, is there any way that we could give an extra, because substitutes don't get paid much. I mean, maybe a $10 to $25 hazard pay, something that we could give the substitutes, because I too have a concern about not getting substitutes in at this time. I mean, is there any reimbursement we could get if we did that?
It's not reimbursable.
And there's nothing in the budget to do that either? Well, I guess we're going to have to see what comes.
It's not FEMA reimbursable. If the board chooses to increase the rate of pay for a substitute, then...
Or for CARES?
Well, again, I mean, we haven't been approved for the CARES Act, and we've spent it already,
Okay.
basically, from what we told them.
Okay. Jane?
Well, I agree with Mrs. Ziegler, and I would like to see us start to school no earlier than August the 31st, which is a Monday, which would give us the maximum time to see how this goes. Now, yesterday I talked to the chairman of the Board of Doctors Hospital. I talked to the chief of staff of Sarasota Memorial, only because I knew somebody that got me into this wonderful doctor, and then I talked to the CEO of Venice Hospital. And the thing that was so interesting to listen to the discussion was that the chief of staff said to me, well, why haven't you all talked to me? I think we need a health advisory or medical advisory committee. Other school districts are doing that, and I would really think that we may want to invest in that because they can give us some really great help. Michael does a wonderful job at the Department of Health, but I think we should look at others in our community. But he said to me, he said, the cases aren't going down. In 2 weeks, we'll be out from the 4th of July enough so that the 4th of July people who are out and about, those cases will start hitting the street. And yeah, that's very true. So, I am greatly concerned about the cases. I have read everything I could get my hands on. I've listened to webinars from pediatricians in Virginia talking about, well, parents have to sign a form every morning before they send Johnny to school. And if they've lied and said Johnny was good when Johnny wasn't, then maybe they would not let Johnny go. I mean, I've seen all kinds of things because people are scared. And I'm scared. And I hear from a lot of teachers. And, there's the whole philosophy of history repeating itself. The pandemic of 1918 hit in the winter, spring, about the same time as this one. And it sort of came down, and then it crescendoed in the summer and went off in the fall to the worst ever. Millions of people died. I hope it's not going to repeat and be the same way, but it certainly could happen. An N95 mask would be great if you have them fitted properly by someone that actually takes you into a lab and puts one on and sees if it would work and puts you in a big helmet to see if you can still sniff the gas. I mean, it's not, everybody can't just go out and buy one. And a lot of the things that I know that we need to do physically and in terms of facilities, Jody, bless you, because I know it's a big job to know what to do, how to keep our faculty, how to keep our staff, our classified workers, our bus drivers, and our little babies safe. I pulled off the pediatric statistics of how many children have been infected. The Department of Health produces that once a week, and the numbers have gone up. And yes, we have lost children under 18. We have 13 cases of the Kawasaki-like event in Florida. So, the wave started in Miami. It's kind of coming up the state. And it's bad here, it's bad in Tampa, it's bad in Orlando, it's bad all over. But is it going to get better? I'm not sure. I think we have to postpone starting school to the end of August.
Well, I initially said to Mitzi, I would not like to start school until after Labor Day. That was my first comment to you. But I understand with the government's order and everything we have to do, so I would be very happy starting school on August 31st. That would give us 2 more weeks to be able to plan and to get the message out, and I think that that's a smart move, not to start right now. I don't think staff is ready. I don't think we're ready. I understand how hard you guys have been working. I know the push, and you're working days and nights, and you're really torn and upset because I can hear it when I called you. Especially I call Missy, I can hear it. So I know you've really worked hard. But that's not to take anything away from you all, but I just don't think we should start on the 10th. I just have, my gut tells me not to start on the 10th. It's too early. And as long as I follow what I feel inside, I'm normally correct. Laura, I know you're upset. Are you upset about starting later? Okay. I need to know why you're upset, because
No, I don't know why I'm upset.
okay, as long as it's not something that we're saying that,
No, I'm
that
sorry.
we should know. Because I'm sensitive to when you get upset, so I want to make sure that it's not something that we're.
Nothing bad
Maybe you can
anyway.
coach
that
my
we're saying.
husband. That's a good thing. Can I just add though, because
Yeah.
I did ask Art to look at the emergency order in case you went that way, and so I wonder if you would let Art just address it.
Of course we can.
The order says, upon reopening in August, all school boards must provide brick and mortar at least 5 days a week for all students. So it says, upon reopening in August. So that certainly includes August 31st.
Perfect.
My understanding is that all school districts in Florida were opening sometime in August. We are, as Ms. Ziegler said, the earliest, or tied for the earliest. I'm sure others are starting August 10th. But many are starting the week or two after. August 31st is 3 weeks beyond August 10th. I think that's within the confines of the order. It still requires, the order itself requires a plan that has to be approved. Anything that is approved is okay. So we can ask for whatever we want to ask for in a plan. They're certainly telling us that you need, as part of your plan, to have a brick and mortar reopening. So at this point, if what the board is saying is let's put a plan together like has been done, but say it starts on August 31st, that certainly buys the board and the community 3 more weeks to gather more information, frankly. To plan more. Maybe things get substantially better. Maybe things get substantially worse. We just don't know at this point. It gives you more time to reassess. I will say that there are, as there has been discussion, every time you answer one question, it raises 5 more. There are consequences to pushing off the opening to August 31st. Probably a lot of them that I haven't even thought about, but a couple that I've thought about are, first, we still have to have, a certain number of the 180 days. That could potentially be waived, but I think it's realistic, as you all have discussed, to expect we may have some rolling shutdowns. Maybe not the whole district, but maybe portions of the district. So I would think that you would, if you were delaying opening until August 31st, you would be pushing out your closing date 3 weeks. So I don't know what those days are, but you'd be pushing the closing date out 3 weeks. So that would have the secondary effect, of course, of making summer of 2021 a shorter summer. And that may be a small price to pay. We know we've talked about it before when we've taken 1 week away and heard that. But I'm just letting you know that's out there. Another thing, and Mitzi with her CFO hat on will have better understanding of this than I do, but there could be an effect on payroll dates. So I know enough to ask the question, so I'll ask Mitzi to comment on that.
So that is the concern if we push the dates back, because again, normally people have returned to work, so they will be getting a paycheck. The last paycheck for the 1920 school year for a teacher is August 15th. So their first paycheck for the 2021 school year should be August 30th. This would be the same for 186-day staff who won't return to work until August 31st. So the concern becomes there is a statute regarding the FEFP that says no salary payment shall be paid to any employee in advance of service being rendered. And the pay period to pay somebody to work for the 31st is September 15th. So there is an issue where we would have to request a waiver of the statutory provision within our plan and have that approved in order for us to be able to pay our employees. And that's a concern.
Well, could we use that time, could we use it for training and they'd still be in? They would
But
still be
that's not
here?
part of their duty year.
Well, right, but then we
But we
run.
also have we have a half an hour extra every day that would go towards the 180-day requirement, right? So that would
half an
take
hour
away
that goes
some of
towards
it.
the 900-hour requirement. So we
Pardon
have
me?
used that. The legislature changed the rule from 180 student days to 900 hours of instruction back in the last recession, because there were some school districts that were modifying and going to a 4-day school week in order to save funds regarding air conditioning and so on during the 1 day a week. So they changed it to 900 hours of instruction. We have additional hours built in because we do attend school an extra 30 minutes a day.
Right.
So that can be built in. The issue becomes if there is ever, during the course of the entire school year, an emergency that occurs, so God forbid. There's a hurricane, or if there are rolling shutdowns of our schools and these students aren't getting their hours of instruction, to me, that's where we would want to use those hours.
If we have rolling shutdowns of our schools, okay, why can't we make that up? I mean, we can make it, we have 2 weeks vacation
Because it may not be every
in
school.
December. I know my daughter makes plans to do things to go away, but the bottom line is, do you want to save lives, or do you want to, or do you want to open school? I mean, to me, this is very basic. Do you want to save lives? Do you think that opening a little later would save lives? I do. So, or do you want to push opening schools when I don't think we're ready to open schools?
I'm not saying that at all.
No.
I'm just not
I'm
sure
telling
that
you where
were-
I'm coming from.
No, and I agree. But I mean, to me, if we open 3 weeks later, we just extend the school calendar 3 weeks later. It would have to be
We gotta wait.
and we'd have to reconvene the calendar committee to do that.
Bridget?
So, I wanted to, because ironically, when we think of that, we have to, today is like reckoning day. Decisions have to be made
Yep.
because everyone is going crazy because we don't know what we're doing. My gut is that they're just, and that's not on you. It's not because there hasn't been work. These are just, there's unsurmountable amount of questions, but we've got to start somewhere. My gut is that there's a lot of prepping and planning and communication. There's work being done, but there's concerns about a lot of unknowns. This gives that opportunity for members of staff to better understand what their risks are and what the issues are and how the response is going to be. Because I do believe I can only imagine lots of moms are going to be upset that we're not going back on time, but it's for the right reason of preparedness, because brick and mortar, I'm all for it, and I know that's what I know we need to move towards that direction, but I also think the statistics probability is that if you go to the likelihood of someone being in a classroom that's tested positive, whether they're, we're going to go into, and I know that's in the next page, but some of these are higher level where I want us to start making some decisions and planning, but that's to me what I think is is very high probability it's going to happen. And so with these extra time, I know there's going to be some cost benefits we have to look at. I recognize that our calendar will go later into the summer, but honestly, our lives are so turned upside down. If that messes up someone's summer vacation, I will take all the emails and frustration all day long because I just think we have to look at things in a different perspective. And I don't know what day of the week the 31st is.
It's a Monday.
Oh, so and I'm glad you brought that up though, because I don't diminish that these are paychecks that people need, and cash flow is very tough for a lot of people right now. So I would kind of working backwards from the high level down as saying, I believe we should provide some options, and you would be able to talk more to this, but what time do staff need to prepare for this? It's not like a normal school year where you go in an extra week. There's a lot. You just explained a perfect, no, I can't read my writing. Explore.
But I don't pay
But anyway, just talking about the planning of what has to be done, and it's very different than what has been done before. So I just think that's an opportunity to help our staff prepare better. That's all. So if we need to financially look at what that looks like, adding an additional week of planning, because there would be a cost to that, and I know there's contractual aspects too. But those are the things that I think would help us get prepared and allow people to make the right decisions for them.
We do not take input during workshops. I'm sorry. Shirley?
I have some of the same concerns. that have been expressed. And I don't know whether moving it to the 24th, 2 weeks out, or the 31st, 3 weeks out, what that would do. But I know that if our employees missed a pay period, that would have tremendous effect on their finances at home. And it's hard to make that decision right now if we don't know if you can get a waiver on that. I mean, right now, they get it, this is how much they get for teaching, but then, of course, how can we give them a salary on the 31st if we don't know if they're even coming back? I mean, we can't give them a salary and then they not come back. So those are some of the things that I think we have to work out. And I don't know if there's any way we can make that decision next week when we meet on the budget or not, but I would like to see if there is a way that we could do this, but I don't think you can give us all the answers today.
Well, we can't get a waiver until we submit a plan. So,
Okay.
I mean, that would be part of the plan, would be to ask for the waiver.
Okay.
Eric?
I agree with Ms. Ziegler. To say that planning week is when they're going to learn how to do this remote learning, which is completely different than the remote. People need to understand, I get a lot of confusion. Not a lot of people are happy with the delivery of the education model at the end of the last year, and people need to understand that when we're talking about distance learning, we're not talking about that model. And so people need to understand that, and training staff on how to do that, how to adapt their curriculum to that model, even when you're doing that with a classroom and somebody on camera, doing chemistry titration, you need to understand that there may be some people in there who don't have beakers in front of them to do the titration, and so you're going to have to adapt your curriculum. We need to make sure that they know about the safety protocols. They need to know not only the safety protocols that they're going to need to be doing, but the safety protocols that we're going to be doing to see previous discussion, to give them a sense of security so that they will show up, like Ms. Brown was referencing. So I don't think that we should be looking at I think that the staff should probably start the same day that they normally were going to start. I think the amount of training for the changing curriculum, the amount of training that we're going to need for the safety and security, I think right now we don't have enough time for that. So I think that's going to be huge because we need to execute on this plan. They need to understand what happens when somebody gets COVID. They need to understand what happens when the school closes down, and they need to be able to adapt. The time to figure out that is not the time when it happens. They need to know ahead of time what the procedures are, because their parents are going to be asking them. And the worst thing is for a teacher to say, I don't know. Well, you know what that parent's going to say? Well, then I'm not going to send my kid here if you can't answer these questions. And so teachers need to understand the procedure that's going to happen for things that happen in the future. They need to understand the cleaning, and they need to understand the change of curriculum.
So, Eric, can I ask you to clarify?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the teachers starting on the 10th and the students coming back on the 31st?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, I wanted...
No, I didn't say start on the 10th. Start on the normal day, which would be the 3rd, which would be the 3rd.
And then the students come back on August 31st?
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, I need to be real clear.
Dr. Kingsley, did you understand what I was saying?
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was a little worried about it with the fine, but I see Art wants to say something.
Yes.
Well, right now, our teachers have a 196-day contract. That involves them coming the week before. That's why they're currently scheduled to come on August 3rd for an August 10th start. So if we started on August 31st, they'd be scheduled for an August 24th start. We have a lot of 180-day employees who literally start the first day of the school year, whatever that is. So if we wanted teachers or other staff members to start before either August 31st for the 180 or August 24th for the 196, we would have to, I suppose, offer them extra duty days, because contractually we can't make them come in other times. We could certainly offer them extra duty days. of course, that would be whatever that expense is for that period of time, but that's a board decision. But technically, I think that's how you'd have to do it. You can't just tell them to show up on August 3rd unless you were going to stop their year at the normal time. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but that is why God made contract amendments, Art.
Well, it would be.
I'm assuming God's the one who made them.
Well, the Florida legislature made the 196-day contract, and I would not. I would not compare them to God. Let me say that. So I mean, I'm not suggesting there aren't ways we can get deal with it, but I'm telling you, we can't just say show up on August 3rd if we're starting
my
on
concern
August
is people
31st.
losing paychecks.
No, I understand, and I'm sure that's why I brought that up. I want to make sure that's being discussed. So you certainly can offer extra duty days. People would have the option to take them or not. You just have to plan for everybody to take them from a budgetary standpoint. And, I suppose that's what the 7.5% is there for. If this isn't an emergency, what is? So, but that's a board decision, obviously. But that, you need to be aware of it.
I am so
Shirley?
aware.
I would like to, instead of coming back on the 3rd, propose perhaps they come back on the 17th. That gives them 2 weeks before the students come back on the 31st. And I don't know if there's any way we could work with the union to look at some of those, that 30 minutes extra, if we're not going to be using that 30 minutes throughout the year. But I know that there's just so many unanswered questions right now, because I don't want them to be going without a paycheck. But I think to try to get them to have 4 weeks of training is probably too much. I would like to perhaps look to see if we can get the teachers to come back on the 17th, and the students come back on the 31st. Or if the pay issue that we can't bring them, I mean, maybe we can bring them back on the 10th with the students starting on the 24th. But because I agree that teachers might need 2 weeks to get their classrooms together and everything else. But if there's a way that we could work with the union, with that extra pay that we give them because of that extra 30 minutes that we might not be using this year. But I know it's a lot to put in your plan. But I think it's something that we're all looking for, aren't we? I mean, giving the teachers more training, pushing out the start date.
I think the 30 minutes is built into our classes. So it's not just an extra 30 minutes. It's built into the classes and how they educate students. So I only use the 30 minutes to say that part of that 30 minutes will count towards the 900 hours that we need. That's the only reason I use that.
Right. That gives us a little wiggle room in the event you have to miss a couple of days or some time. So that's a good buffer in a typical year. If we had a storm, that would be a buffer for us. Could be used for other reasons, but I think it is part of our normal instructional day that you wouldn't want to just take out at the moment.
Bridget?
Thank you. I'm very encouraged by this because I agree with Mrs. Brown. I think 2 weeks is appropriate. I think, and Mr. Hardy, thank you for bringing it to attention, is about the 31st and the impact on their finances, because it's significant. So I believe that addresses the timing and the planning. We can hopefully see, God willing, a reduction in positive cases, but also it's from here on out, and I believe that that's the case with everyone here, but it's all hands on deck to get everyone informed, to get that plan in place, to get people, send this up to Tallahassee, get approved, but also in the meantime, I think it adds at a necessary time, but then I don't know that we need to do more than, I think the 17th makes sense. I don't know that we need additional 4 weeks, I think. So that would be the 17th and the 31st. One thing, Mitzi, Mrs. Corcoran, you mentioned was, that the calendar committee, is that an absolute requirement? And I don't want to, so that's not something is it a policy that we can certainly have the authority to, or is that statute?
I think I'll have to look, but I believe certainly in an emergency circumstance, the board can deal with that.
Okay, I would assume so. And then
We do
I'll
have
look
to
at that.
send an updated version, though, to DOE.
Yes, I mean, I think, well, it's all going to be part of your plan that you're sending to DOE.
Okay.
Assuming that plan gets approved.
Correct.
Then DOE is signing off on that, so that's not going to be an issue.
And assuming the contractual bargaining agreements aren't an issue, because going back to the extra duty days, if we amend in our plan that we're going to start instruction on the 31st versus the 10th, and the 180 days versus 196 days, are they, I believe our contract doesn't have a date.
The contract does not have a specific, you're going to start on this day. It talks about the number of days and the number of holidays.
So on the latter end, we could end up with a situation, but
but I'm reminded that 11-month employees are coming back
Monday.
next week.
Monday.
okay. So, okay.
So we'll have to see what the issue for them would be on the back end, but they usually work into June anyway.
They do.
So we're talking about,
Their calendar.
if you move things out, you're talking about ending school and I don't know the date, but probably mid-June if you're talking about 3 weeks.
Well, 1 week we could probably get by those extra 2 days from Thanksgiving and maybe 3 days out of the Christmas, but we don't have to change the calendar today, how we get to the end? All right.
Correct.
So when do we start, what are we thinking about now, the 31st or the 24th?
31st, 17th.
Okay.
31st for students,
All right.
17th for teachers.
I heard 17, 24,
Calendar isn't going to change other than
clarification.
the start
Jane?
date and the end date. That's what it sounds like.
Please, God, no hurricanes this year. I was just going to say that, of course, this is all contingent on, of course, I think it would be great, but we would be paying teachers and staff an additional week, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would be 1 week. And we can find out how much money that is, but.
I've already sent
She
an email.
knows. How much, Missy?
Oh, I don't know exactly. I just sent an email.
But, you know, I like the additional training. I think that gives us some wiggle room to make sure we're getting our procedures and things that we need in the classroom around this safety issue better handled. And that can be worked on. But what do you feel, Laura, in your idea of this plan, that it will meet the requirements of DOE? Do you have any magic ball or crystal ball? Do you think, I mean, it looks to me as though, from what I've heard, it would certainly meet the plan.
I believe so. We collaborated with folks across the state and did quite a lot of research.
Okay.
And got the blessing of some folks who got it already approved through the chancellor. So I believe that I don't see any reason why it would not be.
It provides for all of the assurance.
That would be great. And Alachua County moved their date back to the 24th, I just found out. So I think other school districts across the state are going to be moving them back, because August the 10th was pretty soon. My only concern is, how do we have this training and so forth for these teachers if we can't do large groups? We always used to go down to the VPAC and do a lot of training sessions down there, and so that would perhaps have to be adjusted or a bit of a challenge. But other than that, I think that would be a win-win for everybody if we can pull that off.
So just so I'm clear, we're talking now about starting first student day, August 31st.
Yes.
Asking 196-day employees, which certainly includes all the teachers, to come back. They would normally come back August 24th if we started on August 31st, offering them all an additional 5 extra duty days so that they would come back on August 17th. The 180-day employees, if you started August 31st, would start August 31st. So we're now talking about offering those employees an extra 5 duty days, so they would start on August 24th, potentially. Is that, I just want to make sure we're all clear.
Yes.
So we already have some of those who traditionally already come back early to do training. So we have Safety School for Transportation every year, and Food and Nutrition Services does training every year. So I'm not sure if we're doing extra training over what they're already receiving in terms of training. I mean, Jody, what do you think? Is that what you want us to do, or because they already get paid for training?
Well, we certainly could. I think that a lot of our training this year in terms of safety school and bringing staff back is going to be not as efficient as we have done. We bring them all in one space and we run through all the programs. So I think that having the extra week would be great to make sure they understand exactly what's going to be happening. They understand the policies, procedures, and more training can never hurt. The other thing is our youth mental health training. We can utilize that time to do some of that stuff that we've been struggling to find time for. So I think that would work out wonderful on the operations side also.
Now, I see as I move forward on your presentation, you have policy decisions. Do you want to go through that now?
Would it be possible to cancel our executive session and move it to next week so that we can continue the school opening?
That's up to the board. I don't know what our outside counsel's availability is next week, but we could certainly move it to some date in the not too distant future, but it was the board who asked for this meeting, so I leave that up to you. We've got the court reporter here, but I'm sure she could come back another day.
But Art, what is this one for?
This is for the DJ case.
No, we can't delay it. We can't delay it.
But we got the whole school opening. We haven't finished yet.
Well,
I mean, we'll still
have to stay afterwards.
Stay afterwards, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. We'll stay after the board meeting?
Yes. Well, we have another section on the board meeting regarding this, I believe.
Well, it's the last item on the general meeting board agenda where you're going to officially inform the superintendent of what you want to do. But if we're going to keep our 2 o'clock time, we need to wrap this up then, and because we're going to need to have the room emptied.
Okay. The board will close the workshop and be in
recess.
In recess for
We're going to have a litigation meeting.
And then we'll be back here at 3 o'clock. Right now, we need to clear the room, please, because this is a private issue.
This is a litigation meeting involving the DJ case. Present will be the school board, the court reporter, myself, and outside counsel Amy Pitch.
Too small.
So you guys will be back for the meeting?
At the school board.
We're staying here.
I just want you to know, Mike White is in the hospital.
I took my DJ.
So I saw Gwen's email.
Maybe it's on your folders over there.
No, I took it out.
It's bad. Lori's sister came and her niece came.
Somehow we got to get them back in here because they can make decisions on this stuff pretty quick, I think. But we need decisions on masks and stuff right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, that's going to happen this afternoon during the new business